This video contains spoilers, loud noises, and possibly the worst rankings you have ever heard in your life.
I get the bands, count the cheese, I do that shit for fun. For every meal, I pop a pill, I do that shit for dumb.
Episode 1. We're introduced to Luffy, the boy who wants to become king of the pirates. Luffy meets Kobe, the boy who wants to become a marine but is currently used as a slave for Alvita. And together they overthrow Alvita and become friends. B tier. Episode 2. We meet Zoro, Luffy feeds Zoro caca, we find out Zoro's a G, and then Luffy spends 5 minutes trying to get Zoro to join his crew. B tier. Episode 3. Zoro and Luffy beat up Axe and Morgan, we get a better look at Nami, Luffy beats the absolute fuck out of Kobe, and then Zoro and Luffy part ways with Kobe to go find the map to the Grand Line. A tier. Episode 4. We learn a little bit more about Luffy's backstory and witness one of the most iconic scenes in anime. Also, yoink! S tier. Episode 5. Nami and Luffy meet and become best of friends. But it turns out Nami was finessing Luffy this whole time and turns him over to Buggy. Buggy then orders Nami to kill Luffy and she said, nah, I don't fuck with that shit. And then finesses Buggy and saves Luffy. But things are never that easy and Zoro finds out the hard way that Buggy is the wielder of the Chop Chop fruit. B tier. Episode 6. For those of you that don't know, I get very emotional when it comes to sad stuff in anime. And this episode is no exception. We learn about this dog that's been protecting its owner's dog food shop while waiting patiently for his return. The only thing is, its owner is dead! While protecting the store, he gets ran up on by one of Buggy's crewmates. And long story short, they burn the place down. Luckily, Luffy sees this and knows what needs to be done. He then proceeds to fold both the lion and the loser that decide to burn down the pet shop. S tier. Episode 7. Zoro folds this random and Luffy crashes out over Buggy destroying his head. C tier. Episode 8. We learn that Shanks and Buggy were actually old crewmates and that Buggy holds a grudge against Shanks for losing his treasure. But none of that shit matters to Luffy and he sends Buggy to Narnia. B tier. Episode 9. Luffy and the gang meet Usopp and after a simple misunderstanding, they become friends. Usopp ends up telling Luffy that his father is a pirate and his name is Yasuo. Luffy then tells Usopp that he knows his father and that he's actually not a bad guy even though he left him as a kid to become a pirate and hang out with other children. But that doesn't faze Usopp one bit and he decides to go flex his riz. C tier. Episode 10. Kaya's butler starts taunting Usopp talking about how his father left him and like any rational person, he rocks his shit. But this makes Kaya sad and the butler comes to cheer her up. This is where we learn that the butler's been taking care of Kaya since her parents died. Michael Jackson shows up to play with some kids, and it turns out Clawdor isn't as nice as we thought. C tier. Episode 11. Usopp goes to warn Start Village about Clawdor, but ends up becoming public enemy number 1, seemingly leaving him by himself with no one to turn to. That's when Luffy and the gang vow to help Usopp take down Clawdor. B tier. Episode 12. We are shown Clawdor's crew raiding the island, and since Luffy and Zoro are practicing for an upcoming track meet, the protection of Start Village comes down to Nami and Usopp. But Usopp and Nami show why they are utterly useless, and both get folded in 5-second splat. But those 5 precious seconds were much more valuable than you might think. C tier. Episode 13. We see Luffy start bandit beating, Luffy gets knocked out, we see greater animation than Demon Slayer, and Clawdor pulls up to the fight. C tier. Episode 14. Nami wakes up Luffy, Luffy locks in, Kaya pulls out the blicky, Clawdor finesses Kaya by using flashbacks, Clawdor takes the blicky, Clawdor drops the blicky, Usopp picks up the blicky, Usopp misses the shot and Clawdor gets behind him, and then Luffy rocks his shit. C tier. Episode 15. The fight between Luffy and Clawdor starts to pick up. We find out that Clawdor is actually the pirate Kuro, and that he has been planning to take over Kaya's wealth for a very, very long time. B tier. Episode 16. Kuro starts hitting a really bad version of the Curry Sway, but Luffy's unimpressed because he knows how to hit the Dougie. This makes Kuro very angry and he launches an AoE attack on Luffy and his crew. Luffy starts crashing out and in return slams the fuck out of Kuro. Kuro acknowledges that Luffy is a problem and then disappears faster than my dad. Meanwhile, Michael Jackson's over here beating on kids and women, while Zoro does his best to try to get there in time. B tier. Episode 17. Usopp pulls up to stop Michael Jackson and save Kaya, and Luffy gives Kuro some crazy head to the point that he's defeated. Usopp declares that he's leaving to become a pirate, Kaya gives Luffy and his crew a new ship, and Usopp ends up joining the Straw Hat Pirates. A tier. Episode 18. Luffy and the crew get stuck on an island, they meet this old guy who used to be a pirate, they help him find his treasure, turns out his treasure is gone, and we learn about how the power of friendship can solve any problem. D tier. Episode 19. We learn more about Zoro's past and find out why he wants to be the greatest swordsman. A tier. Episode 20. We meet 2 guys that Usopp and Luffy almost killed with a stray cannonball, but it turns out those 2 guys just so happen to be slimes with Zoro. They show Luffy and the others the way to the Baratier, where they can hopefully find a cook. And that's when we're introduced to the greatest One Piece character ever created, Sanji. B tier. Episode 21. Don Krieg's right-hand man Gin pulls up and is demanding to be fed. Little does he know that's not how things roll at the Baratier. Gin ends up getting his ass beat, posed on, and thrown out of the Baratier. This doesn't sit well with Sanji, so he goes out there and gives Gin some food. Luffy sees this and asks Sanji if he can join his crew. Sanji says no and they start to argue, but they quickly get interrupted by Gin means kawaii face. Gin sails off after saying thank you to Sanji. Sanji shows us W Riz, and we find out that Gin is actually a fucking traitor. B tier, episode 22. We're properly introduced to Don Krieg and he pulls up to the Baratier demanding more free food. C tier, episode 23. The chefs of the Baratier are getting ready to fight off Don Krieg's crew, but before they can do that, Don Krieg's ship gets cut in half by Mihawk. B tier, episode 24. Zoro challenges Mihawk to a duel, to which he accepts. Mihawk then tells Zoro that he's gonna use his smallest blade since he sees Zoro as no threat. And to everyone's surprise, it actually works. Throughout this fight, we see the vast difference between Zoro, a pirate of the East Blue, and Mihawk, a pirate who has traveled to the New World. Zoro asks Mihawk if they can finish it with one strike, and Mihawk accepts this challenge, pulling out his sword. He then goes on to say that Zoro is a worthy opponent after all, and he hasn't seen someone with this much talent in a long time. The two clash, and Zoro unfortunately loses. He then asks Mihawk if he can cut him on his chest, to which Mihawk says yes and ends their battle. Though Zoro overall lost this fight, he vows to Luffy to never lose again and to become the greatest swordsman.
One Piece!
Episode 25. The battle between the Baratier and Don Krieg's crew continues, and we learn that Sanji is capable of much more than just cooking food. B tier, episode 26. Gin has Zeph at gunpoint, and we get a little flashback about Sanji's past and why Zeph means so much to him. It turned out that Zeph saved Sanji's life, and also once shared the same dream as Sanji. Sanji then exclaims that this is why he feels like he owes his life to Zeph. A tier, episode 27. Gin and Sanji start running the fade, and I'm not gonna lie, Sanji got folded. Gin starts crying and starts pleading to Don Krieg to leave the Baratier alone. Don Krieg said nah, fuck that, and shoots a missile of poisonous gas at the Baratier. C tier, episode 28. Luffy spends most of this episode getting his ass beat by Don Krieg, but every time he gets knocked down, he just so happens to get back up. Though everyone around him is saying it's foolish for him to keep getting back up, Luffy continues to get up and shows us why he will be the king of the pirate. B tier, episode 29. Luffy defeats Don Krieg and saves the Baratier, marking another big victory against the big pirate in the East Blue. B tier, episode 30. I'm not gonna lie, this shit had me crying. Sanji joins Luffy's crew and says goodbye to the Baratier. A tier, episode 31. Yosuke tells Luffy and Sanji that Nami took the going merry and went to go see Arlong. He also tells them that Zoro, Johnny, and Usopp go to find out why Nami left to go see Arlong. Long story short, Zoro gets captured by Arlong, and we find out that Nami is a traitor and is actually part of Arlong's crew. B tier, episode 32. Zoro baits Nami into saving him. Zoro ends up getting locked up, so Nami cuts him free and tells him to stay out of her hood. B tier, episode 33. Nami kills Usopp, and Luffy and the others finally arrive at Arlong Park. B tier, episode 34. We find out that Usopp is alive and that Nami stabbed herself to fake his death. Nami tells her sister that she high-key fucks with the Straw Hats, and due to all the flashbacks, she passes out from exhaustion. Nami's sister finds the Straw Hats and asks if they would like to hear about her flashback stories. But Luffy says, nah, fuck that shit, I'll see you guys again in 2 episodes. B tier. Episodes 35 and 36 are about Nami's tragic backstory, and not only were they good backstories, they made me cry a lot. And just for that, S tier. Episode 37. We see the iconic scene of Nami asking Luffy for help, and the Straw Hats on their way to slide back for Nami. This episode was a turning point for me while watching One Piece, because it really showed what Luffy and his crew would do for someone that they consider family.
One Piece!
Episode 38. The Straw Hats start picking out their opponents for the big fight, and Arlong throws Luffy into the ocean to take a little swim. B tier. Episode 39. Zoro defeats Hachin, Nami's on her way to the battle, and Sanji dives in to save Luffy but gets cut. A tier. Episode 40. Sanji and Usopp both take out their respective fishmen, Arlong starts clapping on Zoro and Sanji, and then Nami finally pulls up to the battle. A tier. Episode 41. Luffy finally returns to the battle and instantly starts putting Arlong into a combo. It's at this point where everyone realizes that only Luffy has a chance of beating Arlong, and all they can do is watch as the 1v1 between these two start. A tier. Episode 42. The battle between Luffy and Arlong rages on, and they end up crashing into the room that Nami's been using as the navigator for Arlong's crew. Arlong tells Luffy that he'll keep abusing and using Nami until he finally conquers the world. Luffy then says, nah, that's not gonna happen, she's joining my crew. S tier. Episode 43. Luffy defeats Arlong and sets Nami's village free, marking this episode as the biggest victory we've seen Luffy have so far in the series.
One Piece!
Episode 44. Nami joins the Straw Hats and says goodbye to her village. A tier. Episode 45. Luffy receives his first ever bounty. B tier. Episode 46. We find out that Buggy landed on the island with the old pirate dude from earlier and they become friends. D tier. Episode 47. Buggy gets his body back and makes an alliance with the new improved Alvida to get revenge on Luffy. C tier. Episode 48. The Straw Hats make it to Logtown. We get introduced to Captain Smoker. We learn more about the legendary day that was Gold Roger's execution. B tier. Episode 49. Buggy and Alvida make it to Logtown and look for Luffy, while at the same time the Marines are also looking looking for Luffy. C tier, episode 50. Oda thought it'd be funny as fuck to troll us and gives us a whole 20 minutes of Sop completing a side quest. D tier, episode 51. It was so nice Oda had to do it twice. This whole episode is about Sanji winning a fish in a cooking competition. D tier, episode 52. Luffy ends up getting caught by Buggy and is set to be executed in front of all of Lowtown. But that doesn't faze Luffy because he knows he has plot armor and he gets miraculously saved by a bolt of lightning, walking away with nothing more than a couple of burn marks. But Luffy's problems aren't over yet since the Marines are chasing him down. We see Smoker comparing Luffy's smile to Roger's, and the episode ends with this mysterious figure flash stepping through Lowtown. A tier, episode 53. Luffy and Smoker start having their first fight, and I'm not gonna lie, Luffy was low-key getting smacked around. Smoker subdues Luffy, and it's starting to look like it's over for our rubber boy. But then the mysterious figure from earlier comes in to save Luffy, and this random gust of wind allows for Luffy and his crew to escape back to the Going Merry. We learn that the mysterious man's name is Dragon, and the episode ends with the Straw Hats promising to go to the Grand Line together and making a pact to achieve their dreams. S tier, episode 54 to 60 marks our first filler arc. The arc is about the Straw Hats helping this little girl help a dragon find its way home while being pursued by Marines who want the dragon to become immortal. The arc isn't anything special, but it's also not fucking dog shit. And for a filler arc, it's actually pretty enjoyable. D tier, episode 61. It's the last episode of the filler arc, and it shows the Straw Hats entering the Grand Line. C tier, episode 62. We're introduced to Crocus, Laboon, and Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9, who are bounty hunters working under Baroque Works. D tier, episode 63. We learn about Laboon's tragic backstory, and it turns out he's been waiting in the same spot for 50 years waiting for his crew to come back. Luffy starts throwing hands with Laboon, cause why the fuck not? Luffy asks Laboon if they can finish their fight another time, and promises to come back. This makes Laboon very happy, so he lets Luffy put his special sauce on his face. D tier, episode 64. The Straw Hats arrive at Whiskey Peak, a town that seems to love pirates. Things are looking pretty good as the Straw Hats party with the town, but it seemed too good to be true. It turns out that Whiskey Peak is actually an island full of Baroque bounty hunters, and they live off of luring in pirates and taking away their fortune. Right when they're about to take up the Straw Hats, we find out that Zoro never actually fell asleep, and he prepares to take on all the bounty hunters by himself. C tier, episode 65. Zoro starts no diffing the bounty hunters, and we get introduced to Miss Valentine and Mr. 5, who have shown up to eliminate Miss Wednesday, who is actually Princess Vivi of the Alabasta Kingdom. B tier, episode 66. Luffy vs. Zoro. S tier, episode 67. After some unfortunate events, Vivi joins the Straw Hats, and we get introduced to the greatest waifu in all of anime. A tier, episode 68. We see Kobe and Himepo for the first time since the Romance Dawn arc, and we are introduced to Vice Admiral Garp. C tier, episode 69. The boys start their training arc of Garp. B tier, episode 70. We're introduced to Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week, who have been tasked with taking out Vivi. The Straw Hats get stuck on an island called Little Garden and must wait until the log post updates to leave. C tier, episode 71. The Straw Hats meet two giants living on Little Garden and learn that the two giants have been fighting each other for the last 100 years without a clear victor. C tier, episode 72. Luffy and Vivi are just chilling with one of the giants until the booze he drinks explodes in his mouth. The giant gets angry thinking that Luffy spiked his shit, and the two of them start running the fade. We find out Mr. 3 is the one behind the lacing of the booze, and that he did this to cause confusion amongst the giants and the Straw Hats, while making it much more easier to take out Vivi and the giants. C tier, episode 73. Dory and Bragi continue their 100-year-long battle. While they're fighting, Dory slips on some nut, which ends up costing him the battle and makes Bragi the champion of their 100-year-long fight. But then we find out that random nut on the floor was actually Mr. 3's. He then goes on to tell Bragi that the only reason why he won is because of him spreading his nut on the floor. This obviously makes Bragi very upset, and he goes to crash out but finds that his feet are covered in nut. At the same time that this is going on, we find out that Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine are also on Little Garden. They know Dip Usopp because he's more useless in part 1 Sakura, then they easily disarm and kidnap Vivi. B tier, episode 74. Mr. 3 makes a fountain of nut and plans to have it drizzle on Bragi and the Straw Hats until they're completely covered in nut. Right when things are starting to look dire, two goats and a fraud come to save their friends. C tier, episode 75. Our two goats and one fraud quickly become 3 frauds. C tier, episode 76. Mr. 3 uses cum style multi-cum clone jutsu, but since Luffy's a top tier gooner, he sniffs out the real one and defeats Mr. 3. And the episode ends with Sanji talking to Mr. 0. B tier, episode 77. Dory and Bragi use some crazy ass special move to help the Straw Hats escape Little Garden, and this episode marks marks the end of the Little Garden arc. B tier. Episode 78. My beautiful Queen Nami gets sick. D tier. Episode 79. Luffy takes out Wapol, and Nami gets even more sick. C tier. Episode 80. The Straw Hats make it to Drum Island, and they meet Dalton. Dalton tells them that there are very few doctors on Drum Island due to Wapol's tyranny, and that the only doctor that can save Nami just so happens to live on a castle on top of Drum Island. And she's an old lady that rides a reindeer. After hearing this very tragic news, Luffy and Sanji immediately start making their way there to save Nami. C tier. Episode 81. Sanji and Luffy get chased by some polar bunnies. The old hag and this reindeer save a little kid. Wapol's back on Drum Island, and we find out that Dalton is actually a furry. C tier. Episode 82. Dalton and Wapol get into a conflict. Zoro and Avalanche. C tier. Episode 83. We watch Luffy climb to the top of the mountain with Nami on his back and Sanji in his mouth, and if I'm gonna be honest, this was peak. A tier. Episode 84. Nami's awake, and Luffy and Sanji play a good game of tag with Chopper and the old hag. C tier. Episodes 85 and 86 are about Chopper's backstory. I feel like this backstory is very beautiful, and I personally enjoyed it a lot. S tier. Episodes 87 and 88 are both peak, as we see Luffy tell Chopper that he's his friend. S tier. Episode 89. Luffy defeats Wapol. A tier. Episode 90. Chopper has officially joined the Straw Hats.
One Piece!
Episode 91. The Straw Hats start making their way to Alabasta. C tier. Episode 92. We're introduced to Crocodile and Mr. 3, and the Straw Hats are closer to Alabasta. C tier. Episode 93. The Straw Hats have made it to some place in Alabasta. D tier. Episodes 94 and 95. Ace! 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 A tier. Episode 96. Ace tags along with the Straw Hats while they find their way to the kingdom of Alabasta. C tier. Episode 97. The Straw Hats learn the dangers of the desert. D tier. Episodes 98 and 99 mark our second filler arc.
Just why?
Episode 100. We get a VV flashback story. C tier. Episode 101. Most of the episode are about these kids begging their dad to come back home, and the last 5 minutes are about Ace leaving the Straw Hats to go search for Blackbeard. D tier. Episode 102. We get blessed with a 25-minute filler episode about Luffy, Chopper, and Zoro getting lost.
Just why?
Episode 103. We see the officer agents of Baroque Works come together, Vivi and the Straw Hats make it to a town called Yuba, and we learn more about the problems that the Alabasta Kingdom is facing. C tier. Episode 104. A tier. Episode 105. The Marines just so happen to be in Alabasta, and they end up running into the Straw Hats. They then chase the Straw Hats for the rest of the episode. B tier. Episode 106. The Straw Hats are running away from Smoker, and end up running into a dead end that leads to a trap floor. This trap floor ends up putting them in jail, and we find out that Crocodile was behind this all along. This guy gets touched by Robin, and Crocodile begins to violate Vivi. B tier. Episode 107. Bon Clay pretends to be Cobra, and uses disguised Baroque workers to attack the people of Alabasta, forcefully progressing the war between the Alabasta Kingdom and the rebels. B tier. Episode 108. Crocodile just watched Saw 3 and presents Vivi with two options. 1. Leave the Straw Hats and go save her country. Or 2. Try to find the crocodile that has the key to the Straw Hat's cell while it fills up with water. Being the goat she is, she chooses option 2, but quickly gets folded. With no option besides running, she leaves to go find the one and only goat Sanji. B tier. Episode 109. Sanji saves the Straw Hats, and they're back on the run from the Marines. A tier. Episode 110. Luffy and Crocodile start fighting, and long story short, Luffy lost the ability to beat with his right, and then he got brutally penetrated by Crocodile. S tier. Episode 111. Karu and the gang come to help the Straw Hats. Luffy gets saved by Mommy Robin, and we get to see all the people racing to make it to Alabarana. B tier. Episode 112. The rebels get closer to the kingdom, and Vivi tries to use Talk No Jutsu to stop them, but this ends up getting her and Karu fucked up. The kingdom and the rebels start fighting, and Usopp pulls up to save Vivi. We get shown a flashback of the Straw Hats repping Crip, and it turns out that Usopp is actually Bon Clay in disguise. C tier. Episode 113. Sanji starts fighting Bon Clay, Nami and Zoro meet Miss Double Fingers and Mr. 1, and Chopper and Usopp end up taking on these two fat asses. C tier. Episode 114. The fight between these two fat asses and Chopper and Usopp start to escalate. C tier. Episode 115. Chopper and Usopp defeat the fat asses and their dog. Meanwhile, Bon Clay and Sanji are still running the hands. Bon Clay finds out that Sanji's a horny ass motherfucker and starts abusing his weakness. And to end off the episode, we see Vivi making it to the kingdom. B tier. Episode 116. Sanji ends up beating up Bon Clay, and Crocodile has finally pulled up on the scene. B tier. Episode 117. The fight between Nami and Miss Double Finger starts to pick up, and Crocodile starts torturing Cobra to find out where the poneglyphs are. C tier. Episode 118. Crocodile explains his plan to blow up the kingdom, Nami defeats Miss Double Fingers, and the fight between Zoro and Mr. 1 starts to get even crazier. B tier. Episode 119. We see Zoro finally locking in, and after a long gruesome battle, he finally defeats Mr. 1. S tier. Episode 120. Koza finds out that Crocodile is behind all all this madness and goes to tell the rebels to surrender. Things are going smoothly, but then he randomly gets lit up. B tier, episode 121. Crocodile drops Vivi and it looks like she's about to die, when suddenly Monkey D. Luffy pulls up on the scene and saves her. S tier, episode 122. Luffy uses his brain and finds out that sand is actually weak to water and starts putting the hands on Crocodile. But just like last time, Luffy gets sucked dry and defeated by Crocodile. B tier, episode 123. Crocodile realizes that Nico Robin is trying to betray him, so he does the logical thing and packs her up. B tier, episode 124. Luffy and Crocodile start round 3 of their fight, and the Straw Hats try their best to defuse this bomb. B tier, episode 125. Vivi finds out there's no way to defuse the bomb and it's looking kinda grim. But then Pell shows up taking the bomb, sacrificing himself, and saving the kingdom. A tier, episode 126. Luffy starts violently fisting Crocodile and ultimately beats him.
One Piece!
Episode 127. Alabasta Civil War is over, and the people of Alabasta finally get to bask in rain once again. B tier, episode 128. We get some party time, Nami flashes the boys, and Bon Clay becomes an ally of the Straw Hats. B tier, episode 129. The Straw Hats are leaving Alabasta. Luffy goes to say bye to Vivi, but Nami says they can't since they're being patrolled by Marines, which would ultimately put Vivi in a bad situation. So instead of saying bye, the Straw Hats raise their arms, repping the set one last time with Vivi.
One Piece!
Episode 130. Robin joins the Straw Hats. B tier. Episodes 131 and 132 are some random ass filler. D tier. Episode 133 to episode 135 is even more random ass filler. D tier. Episodes 136 to 138 is even more random ass filler. D tier. And episodes 139 to 143 is probably the worst random ass filler we've seen in a long time.
Just why?
Episode 144. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji go scuba diving. C tier. Episode 145. Buggy meets Ace. C tier. Episode 146. The Straw Hats make it to Jaya. Luffy meets this ugly ass motherfucker. And then Luffy voluntarily gets his ass beat by Bellamy. B tier. Episode 147. Zoro and Luffy continue to get their asses beat. Robin finds a map of Jaya Island. And then the Straw Hats get pulled up on by some monkeys. B tier. Episode 148. The Straw Hats learn about the story of Noland and more about Sky Island. C tier. Episode 149. The Straw Hats get sent to catch a bird they need to get to Sky Island. D tier. Episode 150. While the Straw Hats are struggling to catch the bird, Bellamy and his crew pulls up, stealing Cricket's gold and then jumping him in the monkeys. The Straw Hats arrive shortly after and learn what happened, and Luffy decides he needs to go teach Bellamy a lesson. B tier. Episode 151. Luffy folds Bellamy. We're introduced to the 5 elders. The warlords hold a meeting. Whitebeard, Shanks, and we find out that this ugly motherfucker was actually Blackbeard. A tier. Episode 152. The Straw Hats begin their journey to Sky Island. B tier. Episode 153. The Straw Hats meet the Sky in armor and continue their journey towards Sky Island. C tier. Episode 154. The Straw Hats make it to Skypiea, and they learn about how different the island in the sky is compared to their own world down below. C tier. Episode 155. Nami gets stuck in a no-no zone, watches some guy get hit by a Kamehameha, and the Straw Hats get pulled up on by the feds. B tier. Episode 156. The feds attempt to arrest the Straw Hats, but get folded. C tier. Episode 157. The Straw Hats get finessed, and we find out they're getting sent to a sacrificial shrine, leaving only Sanji, Usopp, and Luffy to save them. C tier. Episode 158. Conus is helping the Straw Hats, and then we find out that she betrayed them. Another Kamehameha hits the scene, God comes to save the day, and the Straw Hats begin their journey to go save the rest of their crew. B tier. Episode 159. Our idiotic trio continues their journey to save their friends. The rest of the Straw Hats have made it to the shrine, and Robin, Nami, and Zoro lead Chopper so they can go explore the rest of the forest. C tier. Episode 160. Our trio runs into Satori, and Luffy goes to rock his shit but ultimately gets folded. B tier. Episode 161. Our trio gets folded. B tier. Episode 162. The fight between God and the Sky Priest begins. C tier. Episode 163. We learn about the native tribe that lives on Sky Island. God gets folded by the Sky Priest, and Satori gets folded by Sanji and Luffy. B tier. Episode 164. The Shandia tribe advances to go fight the Sky Priest, and we find out that the missing part of Jaya Island actually disappeared to Skypiea all along. B tier. Episode 165. The Straw Hats are back together and decide to go camping out on the island. D tier. Episode 166. The Sky Priests are still fighting the Shandia tribe, and the Straw Hats are partying with wolves. D tier. Episode 167. Usopp watches this black guy repair the ship, and we're introduced to Inaru. B tier. Episode 168. We learn more about Inaru and the Sky Priest from God. B tier. Episode 169. The Mormon versus Indian War continues, and Wiper challenges Luffy to a fade. C tier. Episode 170. Zoro folds another random, Luffy and Wiper continue their fight, and Sanji gets packed up by Inaru. B tier. Episode 171. Inaru turns Usopp into a proper shade of black, Luffy and Wiper's fight gets more serious, God and Nami get challenged by these two freaks, Luffy gets lost, and Chopper gets challenged by a Sky Priest. B tier. Episode 172. Chopper defeats the Sky Priest.
Finally, I'm one of the pirates too!
S tier, episode 173. Nami and God defeat the twins. Hold on, give me 1 second. And to top it off, we get to hear Nami moan. S tier, episode 174. Robin folds this random and finds a poneglyph. B tier, episode 175. The foursome begins. C tier, episode 176. The foursome continues and Nami, God, and this little girl get swallowed by a snake. C tier, episode 177. Wiper watches his girl get blacked right in front of him by Inaru, and Luffy meets up with Nami and the others. C tier, episode 178. Zoro folds another random. We see Inaru yapping his head off to Robin, and Dad gets hit by a Kamehameha. B tier, episode 179. Inaru tries to create his own battle royale, but everyone decides that he's the main threat and decides to take him on by themselves. B tier, episode 180. We get a flashback about God and Inaru. Inaru then proceeds to trio wipe God, Robin, and Zoro before getting palmed by Wiper. B tier, episode 181. Wiper's attack did absolutely nothing and he too becomes a victim of being blacked. Oh, and Inaru shows us the ship. B tier, episode 182. Inaru goes to pack up Luffy, but it turns out it is 0 damage because Luffy's made of rubber. Luffy then proceeds to kick the fuck out of Inaru. A tier, episode 183. S tier, episode 184. Luffy gets folded by Inaru. Usopp and Sanji wake up after being blacked, and then begin their journey to go save Nami. B tier, episode 185.
I was looking for a light. Appreciate it.
S tier, episode 186. Inaru starts spamming his signature attack, and Luffy and Nami race to go stop him. B tier, episodes 187 to 189 are flashback/backstory episodes about Noland and his relationship with the Shandiite tribe. And in my opinion, this is a really good backstory and I liked it a lot. A tier, episode 190. S tier, episode 191. Inaru summons another big black ball because his sack always comes with 2, and Nami and Luffy race to go destroy it. A tier, episode 192. Luffy destroys Inaru's big black ball and then proceeds to pack him up.
One Piece!
Episode 193. Luffy rings the bell after 400 years, and we see Cricket reacting to it down below. And like every One Piece arc, it ends with them all partying and having fun. A tier, episode 194. The Indians and Mormons work together. Robin learns that Gold Roger left his signature on the bell. She tells us more about poneglyphs, and the Straw Hats begin leaving Sky Island. A tier, episode 195. The Straw Hats leave Skypiea. B tier, episodes 196 to 206 was probably the worst filler I've seen in my life. For starters, I'm not even a fan of the Skypiea arc, so to be hit by this filler arc right after that was like eating a lunchly and then being forced to listen to KSI's music.
Just why?
Episode 207. We meet this old guy and we start the Long Ring Long Island arc. C tier, episode 208. We spend most of the episode getting flashbacks and learning about this old man's past, and Luffy accepts a Davy backfight from Foxy. D tier, episode 209. We spend a whole whopping 24 minutes watching pirates play Hydro Thunder. D tier, episode 210. The Straw Hats lose the boat race, leading to Chopper being taken by the Foxy pirates, and Zoro giving one of his greatest speeches.
A man. Let's suck it up and quietly watch the rest of this game.
What's wrong with you? Don't you know how you must be feeling? Well, here, cut me alive! Give me your flash, you fat Chopper!
That boy. Oh, that's
C tier, episode 211. Zoro and Sanji start playing this very weird game of soccer. C tier, episode 212. Zoro and Sanji win the very weird game of soccer, and Luffy chooses Shelly over Chopper. B tier, episodes 213 and 214 is 48 minutes of a very boring roller derby. D tier, episode 215. Luffy illegally swallows some balls and Foxy gets another win. D tier, episode 216. The next game is Red Light Green Light, and the Straw Hats look like they're gonna win, but they ultimately lose due to Zoro being a special person. D tier, episodes 217 and 219 is Luffy versus Foxy in the ending of the Long Ring Long Island arc. C tier, episodes 220 to 222 is the start of a filler arc where the Straw Hats lose their memories due to a kid who was high off a fence given to him by a seahorse.
Just why?
Episode 223. Luffy and Zoro start fighting due to Zoro being given Fent by the seahorse. C tier. Episode 224 marks the ending of the losing your memories to a junkie seahorse filler arc. D tier. Episode 225 and 226 is the return of Foxy in the episodes where I blew my brains out.
Just why? Why?
In episode 227, the Straw Hats get folded by Aokiji and he ends up freezing Robin. A tier. Episode 228. Luffy tries to slide back for Robin, but ultimately ends up getting frozen as well. A tier. Episode 229 marks the Straw Hats making it to Water 7. B tier. Episode 230. The Straw Hats tour Water 7 while looking for a shipwright. We're introduced to Water 7 shipwrights, and then Robin ends up running into a very mysterious looking person. B tier. Episode 231. The Straw Hats sell their treasure from Skypiea and become very rich. They then run into Kaku who goes to check out their ship. They talk to Iceberg, and then they get robbed. B tier. Episode 232. Kaku investigates the Mary. We meet Polly and Rob Lucci. Usopp gets kidnapped, and we find out that the Going Merry is cooked. B tier. Episode 233. We learn more about why the Going Merry can't be fixed. Nami and Luffy realize they got robbed. We find out Usopp got brutally jumped, but Usopp is no bitch and he decides to slide back. A tier. Episode 234. Usopp ends up getting fucking folded, so the Straw Hats pull up to Frankie's house and slide back for Usopp. S tier. Episode 235. Usopp gets mad at Luffy for wanting to abandon the Mary and get a new ship, thus leading him to challenge Luffy to a fight. S tier. Episode 236. Luffy versus Usopp begins, and I'm not gonna lie, this is top 10 episodes of all time. This was a fight between two bros that were fighting for what they thought was right. The fight was close with both of them going blow for blow, and although Usopp was defeated, the episode left you feeling like neither side really won.
One Piece!
Episode 237. We find out that Iceberg was shot and we're introduced to Frankie. B tier. Episode 238. Luffy and Frankie start fighting but quickly get interrupted by Galley Lost shipwrights who showed up to tell everyone that Luffy and the Straw Hats shot Iceberg. A tier. Episode 239. Luffy is about to be killed by Galley Law, but then Frankie causes a distraction allowing for Luffy and Nami to escape. Later on we see Chopper and Sanji playing Ding Dong Ditch with Usopp. Luffy breaks into where Iceberg is being kept safe. Iceberg tells Luffy that Robin was part of the people that try to slime him out, and then he pulls out his 9. A tier. Episode 240. We find out that Robin's doing some shady stuff. Sanji and Chopper end up running into Robin, where she says that she is responsible for shooting Iceberg, and then she says that she'll be parting ways with the Straw Hat crew. A tier. Episode 241. Usopp starts getting materials to fix the Mary. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats are discussing whether or not they should go save Robin, and after coming to an agreement, they go to camp out Iceberg's place to find Robin. B tier. Episode 242. Robin and the masked figures pull up on Iceberg to retrieve the blueprints to the ancient weapon. A tier. Episode 243. We see that some of the main members of Galley Law have been defeated, and the Straw Hats start making their move. Meanwhile, Iceberg and Robin get into a huge debate which ends up with Robin straddling Iceberg. Luffy gets unstuck and starts making his way over to the action. Polly finesses these two masked figures. Luffy attempts to save Polly, but it leads to the both of them getting apprehended. And to top the episode off, we find out that these masked figures are members of Galley Law who just so happen to be part of Cypher Pole 9. S tier. Episode 244. Usopp gets kidnapped by Frankie. We find out that Iceberg trusted Frankie with the blueprints to the ancient weapon, and our two favorite Straw Hats pull up on the scene. A tier. Episode 245. Robin tells the Straw Hats that she must leave them in order to make her dreams come true, and before Iceberg can say that's all a cap, she shuts him up and makes her exit, leaving Luffy and Zoro to be folded by the agents of CP9. A tier. Episode 246. Rob Lucci turns into a giant kitty cat and sends both Luffy and Zoro to Narnia. We see Frankie and Usopp talking while Usopp works on the Mary, all while at the same time CP9 begins their search for Frankie. A tier. Episode 247. Frankie attempts to beat some sense into Usopp so he can understand that the Mary is broken. Usopp has a breakdown about fucking the Mary. Frankie tells us that some ships develop spirits depending on how well taken care of they are. And the episode ends with CP9 pulling up on Frankie. B tier. Episodes 248 to 250 are some flashback episodes about Iceberg and Frankie's past. A tier. Episode 251. Frankie gets apprehended by CP9, and Kaku decides to be a hater and sends the Mary into the storm. Iceberg tells Nami how Robin truly felt about the Straw Hats.
That excluding me, all of the other Straw Hat pirates will be allowed to leave this island safely.
And as long as you have that, you don't care what happens to the rest of the world?
I don't.
Giving Nami more motivation to go save Robin. And to top the episode off, we get some wise words from Sanji.
When a woman tells a lie, a real man forgives her.
S tier. Episode 252. Frankie and Usopp are still being hauled off by CP9. Chopper and the people of Water 7 go looking for Luffy and Zoro. Meanwhile, Nami's making her way towards the train station to save Robin, but unfortunately doesn't make it there in time. A tier. Episode 253. Nami finds a note and transponder snail from Sanji, and we find out that he snuck himself aboard the train. Sanji no diffs some fraud, and Nami finds Luffy. B tier. Episode 254. Nami tells Luffy the truth about Robin. Luffy and Zoro both get unstuck, and the Straw Hats prepare to go save Robin. A tier. Episode 255. 285. Sanji ends up running into Usopp and Frankie, Iceberg fixes up Rocket Man, and Luffy and others get on their way to go save Robin. B tier. Episode 256. We get a really sad Frankie flashback, and Luffy, Polly, and the Frankie family make an alliance to go save their friends. C tier. Episode 257. Luffy and Zoro cut through a wave. Luffy tells Sanji that he can go all out to save Robin. Usopp continues to be the fraud we all know he is, and decides to leave Sanji and Frankie, thus leading to the birth of Sniper King. A tier. Episode 258. The wind carries money. Sniper Island far away. And I take aim is straight and true. Boo la la boo. Frankie, Sniper King, and Sanji start making their way to their train, but then they run into this weird guy who's stuffing his face with white stuff. After seeing such heinous things done in the kitchen, Sanji decides he'll fight the guy on his own. B tier. Episode 259. Sanji starts fighting the Diddy chef. Frankie starts fighting some random that no one remembers, and Sniper King is able to find Robin. B tier. Episode 260. Sanji keeps fighting the chef. Sniper King gives a heartfelt speech about friendship to Robin. Frankie becomes a reverse centaur, and Zoro continues to show why he has the most aura on the Straw Hats. A tier. Episode 261. Zoro destroys a guy you only remember because of how badly he got destroyed. Sanji defeats the chef. Frankie defeats the other random, and the two find themselves face to face with CP9. A tier. Episode 262. Sniper King throws a smoke bomb and tries to get away with Robin. But Robin doesn't fuck with that and ends up snapping his neck. So Frankie decides to sacrifice himself to let the others escape, not knowing that Drake had a portal gun. A tier. Episode 263. Sanji and Sniper King both get folded by Bluno, and Robin decides to go back with CP9. Later on in the episode, we see both Robin and Frankie making it to Enies lobby. A tier. Episode 264. Luffy arrives at Enies lobby to save Robin. B tier. Episode 265. While Polly and the Frankie family start fighting to open the gates for the Straw Hats, Luffy gets ready to solo Enies lobby. A tier. Episode 266. CP9 has a meeting, and we find out the power levels of each CP9 member. Oh, and we're introduced to Spondum. B tier. Episode 267. Frankie starts swallowing Spondum. Luffy continues no dipping Marines. The Frankie family continues to push ahead, and we find out why the Rocket Man is called the Rocket Man. B tier. Episode 268. The Straw Hats arrive on Enies lobby, and we watch Spondum get taken over by Chris Brown.
I woke up Chris Breeze. Oh my god, it's a man.
A tier. Episode 269. Robin talks back to Spondum, thus leading him to awaken his inner Chris Breezy once again. Luffy continues no dipping the Marines. The Straw Hats and the Frankie family continue catching up to Luffy, and then Luffy runs into Bluno. A tier. Episode 270. We get a backstory on the giants that are guarding Enies lobby, which leads to the giant and Sniper King becoming friends. Totem sacrifices himself for the gang, and Luffy continues fighting Bluno. A tier. Episode 271. Kaku and Khalifa eat their double fruits, and Luffy continues fighting Bluno. A tier. Episode 272.
Second gear!
One Piece!
Episode 273. Luffy defeats Bluno. Sniper King and the Giants start making their way through Enies lobby. The Frankie family and the Straw Hats start making their way to the top of the tower. And Spandam starts preparing to turn in Robin and Frankie. S tier. Episode 274. The Straw Hats pull up to save Robin.
One Piece!
In episodes 275 and 276, we get to learn about Robin's terrible and tragic backstory. S tier. Episode 277. I'm just gonna let the episode show you what it's about, because as a wise man once said, some things are so beautiful that they end up becoming unexplainable.
It's me! It's Robin! I've grown since the last time, so maybe you don't recognize me. I've been waiting for you all these years. Just once. Someday. I wanted to hold your hand and walk together like a family.
You must have studied hard while I was gone, huh? These aren't things that just anyone can do. I'm so proud.
Stop it! I want to stay with you! Mommy! No!
From now on, for my sake as well, you must live, Robin!
One Piece!
Episode 278.
Sniper King. Shoot down that flag.
Roger.
Robin! There's still something I want to hear you say! Tell me you want to live! I want to live! Take me with you! Take me away from here!
One Piece!
Episodes 279 and 283 are all recaps because why the fuck not?
Just why?
Episode 284, Frankie burns the blueprints of Pluton, and the Straw Hats go to save Robin. S tier. Episode 285, the Straw Hats learn that they must find the real key from one of the CP9 members. Luffy heads off to go find Robin, and the remaining Straw Hats get ready to fight the CP9 members. A tier. Episode 286, Giraffe look funny, people laugh, and Giraffe get mad. A tier. Episode 287, Khalifa beats Sanji because he can't fight women. B tier. Episode 288, Nami gets ready to slide back for Sanji, and Frankie packs up Fukuro. B tier. Episode 289, Fukuro gets backed up and him and Frankie Luffy continue fighting, Luffy continues catching up to Robin, Sniper King becomes a sword, and Frankie packs up Fukuro once again. A tier. Episode 290, Chopper takes a perk and becomes a monster. A tier. Episodes 291 and 292 is the start of the One Piece but if they were samurai instead of pirates filler arc. C tier. Episodes 293, Nami gets folded by Khalifa, Perky Chopper beats the fuck out of Kumadori sending him to Narnia, and Luffy runs into Rob Lucci. A tier. Episode 294, Fandom accidentally hits the button for the Buster Call, and Luffy and Rob Lucci start having a generational fade. A tier. Episode 295, Waifu on Waifu Combat, Perky Chopper, and to top it off, Shadow Clones. B tier. Episode 296, Nami defeats Khalifa, Frankie turns Chopper back to normal, and Zoro locks in. B tier. Episode 297, Zoro starts fighting Kaku, Sniper King gets finessed by Jabra, but then gets saved by my goat Sanji. Luffy continues fighting Rob Lucci, Frankie starts making his way towards Luffy and Rob Lucci, and the Buster Call starts arriving towards Enies lobby. A tier. Episode 298, Sanji defeats Jabra. S tier. Episode 298, Spandam Breezy is back at it again, Frankie shows up to help jump Rob Lucci, and the fight between Zoro and Kaku begins to pick up. A tier. Episode 300,
Suffering is welcome on the path to bloodshed. Ashera! Silver Mist!
S tier. Episode 301. After some light bullying, Spandam starts making his way to turn Robin in, but ends up getting sniped by Sniper King. Frankie pulls up to save Robin, and then Robin gets revenge against Spandam Breezy. S tier. Episode 302. Rob Lucci cuts open a wall and starts making a flood, explaining how everyone caught inside the tunnel will most likely die. And to make matters worse, the Buster Call has arrived at Enies lobby. A tier. Episode 303 is a continuation of that samurai filler arc from earlier. C tier. Episode 304. The mass destruction of the Buster Call begins, causing Robin to have PTSD. The tunnel's still being flooded, and Luffy punches the shit out of Rob Lucci. S tier. Episode 305. We get a backstory on Rob Lucci and learn how menacing he truly is, and Lucci and Luffy continue having their fight. A tier. Episode 306. We find out Kokoro's a mermaid. A tier. Episode 307. Frankie spits some peak.
Hurry up, Straw Hat! Your friends are all here! They're waiting for you! Come on! You hear me? You better not die! I won't accept it!
A tier. Episode 308. The Marines pull up and the Straw Hats are forced to fight them off. Meanwhile, Luffy's giving his all against Rob Lucci, but he sadly gets fisted a little bit too hard. And it looks like it might be over for our favorite rubber boy. S tier. Episode 309. Usopp gives the speech of a lifetime, motivating Luffy to get up and defeat Rob Lucci. One Piece! Episode 310.
Everyone! Get on board the ferry!
One Piece! Episode 311. Frankie sends the Straw Hats and the Mary flying away, thus escaping the Marines and getting a good ending. S tier. Episode 312. Though things might seem like they fade away, if you truly love them, in your heart they will stay. True. One Piece! Episode 313. We find out Garp is Luffy's grandpa. A tier. Episode 314. Luffy and Zoro see the new and improved Kobe, and we find out Luffy is the son of Dragon. A tier. Episode 315. The Straw Hats have a party to celebrate the end of the arc. Robin and Aokiji have a deep talk, and she starts to remember some wise words from a wise man. True family isn't just related by blood. True family are the ones that will stay by your side no matter what. True. A tier. Episode 316. Shank pulls up to tell Whitebeard to tell Ace to stop chasing Blackbeard, and Whitebeard takes this as disrespect, causing the two to fight. Meanwhile, Frankie's working on a new ship for the Straw Hats. S tier. Episodes 317 and 319 are some random yet wholesome filler. D tier. Episode 320. The Straw Hats get their new bounties. B tier. Episode 321. The Straw Hats receive their new ship, the Thousand Sunny, and Luffy takes Frankie's underwear. A tier. Episode 322. Frankie joins the Straw Hats. A tier. Episode 323. Usopp is back on the Straw Hats. S tier. Episode 324. The Straw Hats are able to escape Garp, and for the rest of the episode, we see the One Piece world reacting to the Straw Hats' new bounty. B tier. Episode 325. Blackbeard and Ace finally have their fight. S tier. Episodes 326 to 335 is a filler arc about the Straw Hats getting back their Jolly Roger from DJ Khaled and his family of misfits. D tier. Episode 336. Episode 337.
Could you perhaps show me your panties?
Yeah, right!
B tier. Episode 338. We learn about Brooke's tragic and sad backstory, and the Straw Hats make it to Thriller Bark. B tier. Episode 339. Nami, Usopp, and Chopper start making their way towards Thriller Bark, where they end up running into Cerberus. C tier. Episode 340. The gang runs into trees on crack, ugly zombies, sexy zombies, and a ditty doctor. C tier. Episode 341. Nami gets diddled in the shower. The rest of the Straw Hats make it to Thriller Bark, and we see even more freaky shit. C tier. Episode 342. The useful Straw Hats fight some zombies, while the useless Straw Straw Hats learn about Diddy's Frankenstein while being stalked by someone else. C tier. Episode 343. We learn more about the victims of Moria. This old man with serious injuries asks Luffy for help, and Luffy vows to save everyone that lost their shadow to Moria. C tier. Episode 344. Team Useless gets folded by Samurai Skeleton, while Team Useful starts making their way through Diddy's mansion.
Everyone is zombie night. Round and round until you die. Everyone is zombie night. Round and round until you die. Zombie night!
C tier. Episode 345. Team Useless continues to be useless until they are saved by a zombie that acts like Sanji. B tier. Episode 346. Team Useful gets pulled up on by zombie generals. Zoro gets added to the Diddy victims. We meet a zombie that acts like Zoro. Luffy gets boxed like fish. And Frankie and Robin get pulled up on by a spider monkey. C tier. Episode 347. The Diddler and his yandere chase after Team Useless. And Robin learns how to fly. C tier. Episode 348. Nami is able to tame a yandere by saying she's a guy. Luffy meets Moria. Frankie and Robin get covered in some sticky white stuff. And Brook pulls up to save the day. C tier. Episode 349. Brook explains what happens when your shadow gets taken from your body and put into a new one. And Luffy gets his shadow taken away by Moria. B tier. Episode 350. Moria shows us oars. C tier. Episode 351. Moria puts Luffy's shadow inside of oars, thus awakening the evil giant. C tier. Episode 352. Moria holds a mukbang so oars can get his strength back. We get a flashback about Brook fighting the skeleton samurai, and Brook starts his rematch against the skeleton samurai. B tier. Episode 353. We learn that Brook was part of the crew that left Laboon behind, and then we get a 5-minute flashback about the Laboon adventure we had earlier in the series. C tier. Episode 354. We get a very long yet much needed recap about Laboon once again, and Brook loses to the samurai skeleton. C tier. Episode 355. The Straw Hats get ready to go defeat Moria, but end up getting pulled up on by Oars. C tier. Episode 356. Oars decides he wants to become a pirate and walks off. The Straw Hats get pulled up on by Perona, and since Usopp is a loser, he's the only one that can fight her one-on-one, allowing for the other Straw Hats to go save Nami. C tier. Episode 357. Brook is about to lose his fro and his right to be black, but gets saved by Zoro. Meanwhile, Sanji pulls up to crash the wedding. C tier. Episode 358. Luffy struggles to fight Moria, Sanji saves Nami, and then he crashes out.
There's an issue. A little something between the two of us that goes back a long way.
B tier. Episode 359.
My dream, I saw it so clearly. I could do so much good with it. Use it to protect new girls. No, I mean, I could help all mankind and new girls. No, I had this beautiful vision of the future and new girls.
A tier. Episode 360. Most of the episode is Usopp getting folded by Perona, but then he finds out the truth behind her power and reveals her weakness. B tier. Episode 361. Usopp defeats Perona. B tier. Episode 362. Samurai gives the sword to Zoro, and Brook gets his shadow back. Meanwhile, Luffy's still getting no-diffed by Moria. B tier. Episode 363. We learn the tragic and sad truth of the Diddy Doctor sexy zombie, and Luffy meets Oars. C tier. Episode 364. Most of the episode is spent trying to defeat the Diddy Doctor, and the episode ends with Oars pulling up on the Straw Hats. C tier. Episode 365. The Straw Hats get folded by Oars. C tier. Episode 366. Nami defeats Absalom, and the Straw Hats get back up to fight Oars again. B tier. Episode 367. The Straw Hats continue fighting Oars, and Kuma arrives in Thriller Bark. B tier. Episode 368. The Straw Hats start putting in some work in on Oars, and Perona gets poofed away by Kuma, allowing Nami to see the true difference in power between them and the Warlords. B tier. Episode 369. We learn the result of Ace vs Blackbeard and how it affected the whole One Piece world. B tier. Episode 370. The Straw Hats continue their hard fight against Oars. Meanwhile, Luffy meets some people on Thriller Bark that lost their shadow, and they stop him full of BBC so we can defeat Oars. B tier. Episode 371. The Straw Hats keep fighting Oars. Things start to get dire as Robin loses her shadow, and some of the Straw Hats get defeated. B tier. Episode 372. Nightmare Luffy pulls up to save the day. It knocks out Moria and Oars before passing out. A tier. Episode 373. Oars gets back up, just to be brutally crushed by Luffy and the gang. Moria, however, is still up, and becomes a giant monster after sucking up all the shadows. S tier. Episode 374. Luffy defeats Moria for real this time, and although he throws up everyone's shadow, it becomes a race against time as the sun starts to rise. S tier. Episode 375. Everyone's shadow that was taken by Moria returns to them, and it looks like the day is saved. But then Kuma just had to show up and crash the party. A tier. Episode 376. The Straw Hats defy and resist Kuma, thus leading him to turn Thriller Bark into Hiroshima. A tier. Episode 377.
What in the hell happened here?
What happened here? Nothing at all.
One Piece! Episode 378. The Straw Hats keep up the tradition of partying after every big arc. B tier. In episode 379 and 380, we get a much deeper flashback about Brook and Laboon. A tier. Episode 381. The Straw Hats say goodbye and they leave Thriller Bark. B tier. Episodes 382 and 383 are, believe it or not, are filler episodes about helping little girls create crystal meth.
Just why?
I
Episode 384 is a filler episode about how Brooke tries to find out how you can be useful for the Straw Hats. D tier. Episode 385. We meet a starfish and a mermaid. C tier. Episode 386. The Straw Hats get attacked by people and flying fish. C tier. Episode 387. Cammy begs Nami to help her, and after some slight consideration, the Straw Hats get ready to save the day. C tier. Episode 388. Sanji bounty gag comes full circle. A tier. Episode 389. We get a very sad and tragic backstory about Duval, just for Sanji to kick his ass. B tier. Episode 390. The Straw Hats make it to Sabayoti Archipelago. B tier. Episode 391. We're introduced to the Celestial Dragons, who just so happen to be terrible people. A tier. Episode 392. We learn about the pirates of the worst generation. A tier. Episode 393. Cammy gets kidnapped by a teddy bear, and Zoro tries to kill a dragon, but ultimately gets stopped by Jewelry Bonnie. A tier. Episode 394. Cammy becomes a victim at slave auction, and we're introduced to Rayleigh. B tier. Episode 395. The Straw Hats show up to the slave auction to save Cammy. B tier. Episode 396. One Piece! Episode 397. The Straw Hats start fighting the slave auction's guards until Rayleigh uses Conqueror's Haki, knocking everyone out. A tier. Episode 398.
Monkey D. Luffy worth 300 million.
I got this.
Eustace, Captain Kidd, worth 350 million.
I said I got this.
Trafalgar Law, worth 200 million.
Yeah, you two can keep bickering. Meanwhile,
I'll handle this by myself.
S tier. Episode 399. As more Marines start appearing on the battlefield, each pirate crew starts getting away. But then Ken and Law end up running into Kuma. A tier. Episode 400. Find out that Rayleigh used to be Gold Roger's right-hand man. He tells a very original, never-seen-before execution story about Roger. He tells the Straw Hats to meet back in 2 days while he coats the ship. And we see that Yellow Monkey has appeared in Sabayoti. A tier. Episode 401. Yellow Monkey starts wreaking havoc in Sabayoti. Law and Kid are fighting Kuma. And the Straw Hats get prepared to fight their own Kuma. A tier. Episode 402. 4 pirates of the worst generation get no-dipped by Kuma and Yellow Monkey. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats still struggle to fight their Kuma. A tier. Episode 403. The Straw Hats narrowly defeat their Kuma. Sentamaru pulls up, Yellow Monkey pulls up, and then Yellow Monkey attempts to kill Zoro. A tier. Episode 404. Law and Kid defeat their Kuma. Rayleigh saves Zoro, and then Kuma makes Zoro go poof. S tier. Episode 405.
Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, Nami, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, Brooke. They're all gone.
One Piece! Episode 406. The Samurai Filler continues and we get to see Brooke in action. B tier. Episode 407. The Samurai Filler arc ends. C tier. Episode 408.
Hold on, what is this?
Is something wrong?
We've been remiss in our mushroom picking duties. There's one between her legs that we failed to catch. How careless of us.
B tier. Episode 409. Luffy wakes up in a society surrounded by strong Amazon women. He shows them his mini Yum Gum bazooka. He crashes out over his new fit, becomes an enemy of the Amazons, kidnaps an Amazon, and then becomes friends with an Amazon. B tier. Episode 410. Luffy continues running from the Amazons, and we're introduced to Boa Hancock.
Love, love,
Let me get your bathwater. B tier. Episode 411. Boa Hancock eats an old lady out the window, but it's okay because she's beautiful. Luffy escapes the Amazon women, but then ends up falling into Boa Hancock's bath. It should have been me. B tier. Episode 412. Luffy starts fighting the Gorgon sisters. B tier. Episode 413. Luffy uses Conqueror's Haki. A tier. Episode 414. Luffy defeats the sisters and saves their bag tattoo from being seen. A tier. Episode 415. We learn about the tragic past of Boa Hancock and her sisters, and Hancock becomes fond of Luffy.
I've decided I like you. You said that there was somewhere you needed to go, yes? Well, my ship's at your command.
Should have been me. A tier. Episode 416. Luffy finds out about Ace's execution. The old hag tells Luffy all the obstacles he'd have to go through just to save Ace, and Boa Hancock gets sick. A tier. Episode 417. Luffy asks Boa Hancock if she can take him to Impel Down, and she says yes because she's madly in love with Luffy. The two set off for Impel Down. We learn that the Marines are afraid of Whitebeard coming to free Ace, and the episode ends with Garp visiting Ace in Impel Down. A tier. In episode 418, we see how Nami and Frankie are doing. B tier. In episode 419, we see how Sanji and Chopper are doing. B tier. In episode 420, we see how Robin and Usopp are doing. Another B tier. In episode 41, we see how Zoro and Brooke are doing. We see the Marines and the Warlords getting ready for Ace's execution. And Garp and Ace get ready to talk. A tier. Episode 422. Ace tells Garp that Whitebeard is his true father. We see how prisoners of Impel Down get tortured. And Luffy has made it to Impel Down to save Ace. B tier. Episode 423. Luffy continues infiltrating Impel Down and ends up running into Buggy the Clown. B tier. Episode 424. Luffy and Buggy speedrun level 1 of Impel Down. B tier. Episode 425. Boa Hancock raises up the Warden. prison, Buggy raises up some inmates, and we run into the wielder of the Cum Fruit, Mr. 3. B tier. Episodes 426 to 429 is the Little East Blue arc. D tier. Episode 430, Luffy, Mr. 3, and Buggy fall down to level 3, and Ace and Jinbei have a conversation.
That is why I object. If he happened to die, what would become of the sea? Who would dare to welcome the chaos that would reign in his absence? Who but a fool would dare to usher in such madness? I wanted to rescue you, Ace, but I failed. Even so, I haven't given up hope yet. I believe that a miracle and our chance may come.
A tier. Episode 431. The Marines in Impel Down find out that Luffy's infiltrating it, and that 3 criminals are just walking through some sand. B tier. Episode 431. Hancock tells Ace that Luffy's coming to save him. We see how strong Magellan is, and we're reunited with Bon Clay. A tier. Episode 433. Our 4 criminals take out a cow. A tier. Episode 434. Our 4 criminals fall down to level 5, where they end up running into Magellan. A tier. Episode 435. Luffy goes Gear 2 and prepares to fight Magellan. Another A tier. Episode 436.
I want my
S tier. Episode 437. The defeated and barely alive Luffy is found by Bon Clay. S tier. Episode 438. Bon Clay tries to defend Luffy's lifeless body, but ends up passing out. And when Bon Boy wakes up, he finds himself in Diddy's basement. S tier. Episode 439. This weird looking man fingers another man, turning him into a girl, and Bon Clay realizes that this weird man is Ivankov. Ivankov takes Bon Clay to where he's keeping Luffy, where we learn that Luffy has lost 10 years of his life due to Ivankov's medicine, leaving Luffy to fight the hardest battle he has ever fought. A tier. Episode 440. Luffy continues fighting for his life, and with the help of Bon Clay and the others, he's able to make a full recovery. S tier. Episode 441. Ivankov gives Luffy a honey pack, and they start making their way to Ace before he gets transported. A tier. Episode 442. Luffy makes it to Ace's cell, but it turns out he was too late. We see Ace try to fight to go save Luffy, but he ends up getting folded and transported anyways. But hey, that doesn't matter, because at least we still have Crocodile. A tier. Episode 443. Luffy creates a dream team to go save Ace and break out of Impel Down. A tier. Episode 444. Luffy's dream team keeps raiding Impel Down. Blackbeard arrives at Impel Down, thus forcing Magellan to use his trump card. A tier. Episode 445. Blackbeard gets ready to fight Shiryu. Ivankov starts fighting Sadie, and the Vice Warden prepares to stand on business. A tier. Episode 446. Luffy rocks the shit out of the Vice Warden. Blackbeard stomps the shit out of the Vice Warden, and Luffy follows up by rocking the shit out of Blackbeard. S tier. Episode 447. Luffy finds out the truth about Blackbeard's double fruit the hard way. Jinbei tells Luffy they don't have time to fight Blackbeard, thus making Luffy have to leave Blackbeard behind. Luffy takes out his anger on this cow, and Blackbeard and his crew get folded by Magellan. S tier. Episode 448. Ivankov and Inazuma both take on Magellan, but both end up getting folded, leaving Magellan to catch up to Luffy and the others. A tier. Episode 449. Luffy holds off Magellan so Buggy and the others can escape, but it turns out there's no ships outside of Impel Down, thus leading to Jinbei, Mr. 1, Crocodile, and Buggy to go get a ship from the Marines. A tier. Episode 450. Magellan gets very angry and turns red, leaving Mr. 3 and Luffy no option but to run. The inmates still don't have a ship. Ivankov comes to the floor. Magellan gets even more angry. Ivankov uses his head, and everyone escapes on whale sharks. S tier. Episode 451.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
Straw Boy! Find Ace, save him, and don't come back! I know you can do it! And you have lots of friends to help you!
Swans never die and never say goodbye.
One Piece! Episode 452. Shiryu joins Blackbeard's gang. Luffy and the others are still coping about Bon Clay. We witness Buggy give the greatest speech of all time, and they start making their way to go rescue Ace. S tier. We see what the rest of the Straw Hats are up to of episode 453 to episode 456. B tier. Episode 457 and 458 is a recap. C tier. Episode 459. Sengoku reveals to the whole world that Ace's real father is Goldie Roger. S tier. Episode 460. We learn the tragic tale of how Ace was born. Luffy and the prisoners continue their way to Ace. Many pirate ships are seen coming towards Marineford, and the Moby Dick floats out of the water at the base of Marineford. S tier. Episode 461. One Piece! Episode 462. As Luffy continues his way towards Marineford, we witness the beginning of a legendary battle that would come to feed every generation of One Piece viewers. S tier. Episode 463. S tier. Episode 464. Oars Jr. comes to save Ace. S tier. Episode 465.
I'm here!
One Piece! Episode 466. Luffy teams up with Whitebeard to save Ace. S tier. Episode 467. Ace tells Luffy to leave, but Luffy tells him to shut up and let him save him. S tier. Episode 468. Smoker stream snipes Luffy, but gets knocked away by Boa Hancock. S tier. Episode 469. Ivankov and Boa Hancock make way for Luffy, but then Luffy runs into Mihawk. S tier. Episode 470. Luffy is seen struggling pretty hard against Mihawk, but then Vista pulls up, letting Luffy get away. While Luffy's making his way towards Ace, we see that Sentomaru has pulled up with an army of Kumas. S tier. Episode 471. Yellow Monkey pulls up on Luffy. Izo saves Luffy. The Whitebeard captains help Luffy. And this sorry ass special person, stupid ass, ugly ass, dumb ass, motherfucker stabs Whitebeard. S tier. Episode 472. We find out that Akainu finesses sorry ass loser, and bro starts yapping about how Whitebeard only cares about Ace, making Whitebeard's allies question him. But this doesn't faze Papa Whitebeard at all, and he hugs the gullible ass loser. Whitebeard tells everyone to lock in, and the whole world watches as the strongest man alive enters the battle. S tier. Episode 473. Akainu makes his balls fall from the sky. S tier. Episode 474. One Piece! Episode 475. Ace is about to get executed, but gets saved by Crocodile. Crocodile starts fighting Doflamingo, and the Battle of Marineford gets even more tense. S tier. Episode 476. S tier. Episode 477. As Akainu and Whitebeard keep fighting, Luffy passes out to exhaustion due to being brought back to life. But it's okay because Ivankov had honey packs on standby, and Luffy's back to his feet and ready to fight. S tier. Episode 478.
Don't you dare!
One Piece! Episode 479. Luffy gets a clear path to Ace, but ends up getting cock-blocked by Garp. S tier. Episode 480.
Ever since you were little, you've never listened to a word I've said, have you? Then you run off and do something crazy. Like old times, huh, Luffy?
One Piece! Episode 481. We get to see the two brothers fighting side by side, and they start making their way to escape Marineford. Whitebeard tells everyone that Ace is safe, and then he smashes Marineford. S tier. Episode 482. Episode 483. Fire Fist Ace dies in front of his brother Straw Hat Luffy. One Piece! Episode 484. Whitebeard slides back for Ace and proceeds to take on the rest of Marineford by himself so his family can escape. But then the man caused this all to happen appears on the scene. One Piece! Episode 485. Whitebeard does the thing.
The One Piece! The One Piece is real!
Shocking the entire world. We then get a time-lapse of Whitebeard's life, thus marking the death of the greatest father in One Piece.
Even after death, his body remains upright. The haunting image of his battered body, which mowed down his enemies, was a sight to behold. And yet, if you were to look upon the proud back of this great man, you would see that in this battle, and indeed his entire life as a pirate, it remained unmarred by any sign of retreat.
One Piece! Episode 486. Blackbeard swallows some of Whitebeard's nut and ends up getting his double fruit powers. One Piece! Episode 487. Sengoku turns into Buddha and rocks the shit out of Blackbeard. Meanwhile, Jinbei's trying to get Luffy away alive. Thanks to Crocodile and Whitebeard's family, Buggy's able to carry Jinbei and Luffy to the Heart Pirates. S tier. Episode 488. Kobe tries to convince Akainu to stop fighting, but Akainu doesn't give a fuck and tries to kill Kobe, but ends up getting blocked by my goat Shanks. One Piece! Episode 489. Shanks orders a ceasefire, and both Blackbeard and Sengoku comply, marking the end of the legendary battle that was Marineford. S tier. Episode 490. We see the world's reaction to the Marines' victory, and we also see Luffy recovering. S tier. Episode 491.
My brother Ace is really dead, isn't he?
Yes, I'm afraid that he is.
One Piece! Episode 492, we get a Toriko X One Piece crossover, C tier. In episodes 493 to 504, we learn more about Luffy and Ace's backstory, and we're introduced to their brother Sabo, A tier. Episode 505.
My crew! I still have my crew! Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brook! They're still out there waiting for me!
One Piece! Episode 506. The other Straw Hats find out about Ace's death, A tier. Episode 507. Rayleigh gives Luffy some very strong advice, A tier. Episode 508. Nami finesses some old men, and Frankie blows up one of Vegapunk's labs, A tier. Episode 509. We see Zoro training with Mihawk and the monkeys, and Brook gets kidnapped by some long arms, B tier. Episode 510. Chopper starts making his way back to Sabaody, and Sanji gets folded by Ivankov, B tier. Episode 511. Rayleigh, Jinbei, and Luffy go back to Marineford, where we see Luffy give his respects to Ace, and the rest of the episode are just people reacting to Luffy going back to Marineford. S tier. Episode 512. The Straw Hats receive Luffy's secret message, A tier. Episode 513. We see what some of the worst generation of pirates are doing, and Blackbeard tries to raise up a 10-year-old Bonnie, B tier. Episode 514. We see Sanji, Frankie, and Nami training, B tier. Episode 515. We see the other 4 Straw Hats training, B tier. Episode 516. We see Luffy begin his 2-year hockey training with Rayleigh, A tier. Episode 517. The Straw Hat Pirates are back together, B tier. Episode 518. A tier. Episode 519.
I trained these legs on the shores of hell for 2 years!
Then you better use them to run, because I will cut you in half!
A tier. Episode 520. A tier. Episode 521.
Is that all?
A tier. Episode 522. The Straw Hats are reunited and start making their way towards Fishman Island. S tier. Episode 523. The Straw Hats continue going to Fishman Island. C tier. Episode 524. The Straw Hats get pulled up on by Caribou, but they easily fold him. And as they continue their way towards Fishman Island, they get pulled up on by a Kraken. C tier. Episode 525. The Straw Hats take out the Kraken, free a shark, and then get sucked away by a current, causing them to be separated. While looking for Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, the others run into this guy that looks like you. B tier. Episode 526. The actual Flying Dutchman appears. The Kraken helps the Straw Hats dodge a volcano, allowing for the Straw Hats to make it to Fishman Island. But before they can enter, they get surrounded by a gang of sea beasts. B tier. Episode 527.
Well, hi there. You're not as scary as I thought you'd be. So you broke in? That's pretty hot. I kind of have a thing for pirates.
S tier. Episode 528. One Piece! Episode 529. The Straw Hats end up running into Cammy, and this beautiful lady predicts that Luffy will destroy Fishman Island. C tier. Episode 530. The Straw Hats meet Neptune and get invited to go party at his crib. And we're introduced to the perky fiend Horty Jones. C tier. Episode 531. Luffy meets the mermaid Princess Shirahoshi. C tier. Episode 532. Luffy and Shirahoshi become friends. The Straw Hats and Fishman Island become ops. And Perky Jones makes an alliance with Vanderdiddy. C tier. Episode 533. The Straw Hats pack up the royal guards of Neptune, and Luffy takes Shirahoshi outside for the first time in forever. C tier. Episode 534. Hachan gets jumped by the YNs, leading to Chopper and Sanji finding his battered body. Meanwhile, we see the beginning of Horty's attack on the kingdom. C tier. Episode 535. Horty arrives at the Fishman Kingdom to take over, but is confronted by the Straw Hats. Meanwhile, Vander begins chasing Luffy and Shirahoshi. C tier. Episode 536. Zoro and Horty begin running a fade underwater, and Megalo ends up throwing up Shirahoshi, revealing her to the citizens of Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 537.
You're just not my type!
B tier. Episode 538. Horty ends up defeating Zoro, and we end up running into Jinbei. B tier. Episode 539. Jinbei talks about the animosity and racism between humans and fishmen. B tier. Episodes 540 and 541 cover the backstory of Tiger and his contributions to fish mankind, as well as showing that he found that humans can be nice. A tier. In episode 42, we get another Toriko special. D tier. Episode 543.
Everyone wants peace, humans and fishmen alike. But our generation can't bring that peace. We're bound to an ugly past. Only children like Koala, free of that history, can change the world.
S tier. In episodes 544 to 546, we see how hard Queen Orihime fought for fishmen and humans to get along, but she sadly ends up dying before getting to see that future. S tier. Episode 547, Horty starts broadcasting his takeover to all of Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 548, Horty begins destroying the signatures that Orihime gathered. Usopp, Zoro, and Brook are caught in a cage. Robin finds another poneglyph. Meanwhile, Luffy prepares to go save his crew, leading to the two squaring off. D tier. Episode 549, Luffy and Jinbei start fighting, but they get interrupted by Robin, leading to the two to talk out their differences, which gets them absolutely nowhere and they end up in the same situation. B tier. Episode 550, the mermaid princes come to save their father, thus leading to Horty to pop more perks, which in return gave him plus 100 into strength. B tier. Episode 551, the princes get ready to take on the perky fishmen, but end up getting folded. B tier. Episode 552, we learn some more about Horty's backstory, and we find out that he was the one who shot Orihime. B tier. Episode 553,
You guys really planning on destroying Fishman Island? Why did you take over the Ryukyu Palace? Did you want to kill them all of them yourselves? Were you the ones who kidnapped the mermaids? Answer me! Come on, Straw Hat. The least we can do is say something. Are you guys supposed to be our friends or our enemies? Explain yourself!
Friends or enemies, huh? Don't ask me. As I'd say, it's up to you.
A tier. Episode 554, Luffy takes out 50k fishmen of Conqueror's Haki. S tier. Episode 555, the Straw Hats begin shitting on the fishmen, and we see them show off their new skills they learned during their 2 years apart. A tier. Episode 556,
This is amazing.
Would you like to dance?
B tier. Episode 557,
The Iron Pirate!
B tier. Episode 558, Luffy begins no-diffing Horty Jones. Meanwhile, Evander sends a ship towards Shirahoshi, causing her to have to fly away to save Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 559, Luffy begins fighting Horty underwater, but Horty pops his bubble, causing Luffy to start to drown and sink. Horty prepares to finish the job, but Luffy gets saved by Fukaboshi. Fukaboshi and Luffy get away from Horty, so Horty decides to go stab Vander. B tier. Episode 560, the new Fishman pirates pop more perks, and the Straw Hats begin fighting them. Another B tier. Episode 561, the Straw Hats continue fighting the new Fishman pirates. Vander knocks himself out, causing the ship to start heading towards Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 562, Horty stabs Fukaboshi, Horty starts popping more perks, and the ship is still heading towards Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 563, we find out that Horty is a D1 hater. B tier. Episode 564, we learn about Horty's hater origin story. B tier. Episode 565,
I swear I'll never let anyone I love die again!
S tier. Episode 566, all the Straw Hats beat their Fishman opponents. S tier. Episode 567, the Sea Kings called by Shirahoshi stop the ship from hitting Fishman Island, thus saving the day and marking the Straw Hats' victory. A tier. Episode 568,
Can't you do this one thing for the guy who saved this whole island?
You can give him some of my blood.
S tier. Episode 569, the Straw Hats celebrate their victory with Fishman Island, and Robin finds out that Shirahoshi is one of the ancient weapons. B tier. Episode 570, Jinbei tells the Straw Hats about the fight between Akainu and Aikiji, and then we see two mysterious figures pull up to Fishman Island. B tier. Episode 571, Luffy declares war on Big Mom. B tier. Episode 572, the Straw Hats begin leaving Fishman Island, and we see Smoker for the first time since Marineford. B tier. Episode 573, the Straw Hats leave Fishman Island and start making their way towards the New World. B tier. Episode 574, the Straw Hats enter the New World. A tier. Episodes 575 to 578 is a filler arc about saving this giant and her dad. D tier. Episode 579, the Straw Hats make it to Punk Hazard, so they send Luffy, Usopp, Zoro, and Robin to go explore it, where they end up running into a dragon. D tier. Episode 580, the Straw Hats start fighting the dragon, and Luffy finds someone stuck inside of the dragon. Zoro defeats the dragon, and then we see that the rest of the Straw Hats have been knocked unconscious. B tier. Episode 581, Team Sanji wakes up in jail, and they end up finding a talking head. Meanwhile, Luffy becomes a centaur and makes a centaur friend. C tier. Episode 582, Team Sanji and Kinemon start running from the feds, where they end up running into a room full of giant kids. Meanwhile, we see that Smoker and G5 have made it to Punk Hazard. C tier. Episode 583, Team Luffy starts making their way to the other side of Punk Hazard, Nami decides to help the kids, and Brook starts fighting Kinemon's body. D tier. Episode 584, Brook gets no dipped by Kinemon's torso, and Smoker and G5 end up running into Law. B tier. Episode 585, Smoker and Law prepare to fight. C tier. Episode 586. Law swaps around Team Sanji's hearts, and Smoker and Law continue fighting. C tier. Episode 587. Law defeats Smoker and takes his heart. B tier. Episode 588.
Oh, dear God! The horror! I can never unsee that! There was a ship hidden beside the laboratory. The letters CC were written on it.
Boobies. Episode 589. Brownbeard tells the Straw Hats the tragic past of Punk Hazard. C tier. Episode 590. A tier, episode 591. The giant kids are having a good time, but then one of them starts crashing out because he doesn't have his perk. Meanwhile, Caesar gets Smoker's heart, and some of the Straw Hats get jumped by Yetis. B tier, episode 592.
I'm begging you. Don't do it!
B tier, episode 593. Luffy and Law make an alliance to take out one of the 4 emperors. B tier, episode 594.
When you're forming an alliance, you have a couple of groups with a common goal, and you negotiate the best way to get it done. Does that sound right?
Obviously.
So you think, but in Luffy's world, that logic gets thrown out the window completely. Just means I'm friends with you. Frankly, you can forget about having any say in what we do. It's all up to him. All up to me.
B tier, episode 595. We learn that Caesar was behind the destruction of Punk Hazard. Smoker and G5 keep trying to enter the building, but end up getting pulled up on by Luffy. B tier, episode 596. A tier, episode 597. Caesar pulls up on the scene and immediately gets folded by Luffy. But unbeknownst to everyone, Caesar can actually use the Force, and he proceeds to pack everyone up. B tier, episode 598. A tier, episode 599. Team Sanji starts running from a slime. Caesar pulls up on the kids with some more perks, and Law tells us that Caesar's boss is Doflamingo. B tier, episode 600. Caesar uses the Force on Usopp and Nami, and then he orders the kids to kill them. The little perky demons attempt to kill Usopp and Nami, but get stopped by Brownbeard. Caesar clowns Brownbeard, and then he blows the place up, leaving Brownbeard, Usopp, and Nami unconscious. B tier, episode 601. The giant slime keeps destroying Punk Hazard. B tier, episode 602. The slime eats a candy, and ends up turning into a petrification smoke. Team Sanji continues running from the smoke. Chopper receives a secret message, and Team Luffy, Law, and Smoker get sent outside to be swallowed up by petrification smoke. B tier, episode 603. Law breaks everyone out. The other Straw Hats keep running from the smoke. Law opens up the door to the building. Luffy, Smoker, and Law make an alliance, and everyone makes it inside just in time. B tier, episode 604. Law tells everyone the layout of the building and where the Smile Fruit machine is, and Luffy turns into a Beyblade. B tier, episode 605. Some members of G5 sacrifice themselves for Tashigi. A tier, episode 606. Sanji saves Tashigi from Virgo. Luffy and Smoker continue making their way towards Caesar, and Chopper and Mocha are doing their best to hold off the giant kids. B tier, episode 607. Luffy pulls up on Caesar. Sanji continues fighting Virgo. Caesar leaves Luffy to fight Monette, and Law makes it to the Smile Machine. B tier, episode 608. We see Doflamingo talking to Virgo. Luffy continues fighting Monette. Mocha leaves Chopper to hold the door by himself. Rick and Kinemon take out a dragon, and then we find out that Momonosuke is a dragon. B tier, episode 609. Law prepares to destroy the Smile Fruit production, but gets stopped by Virgo. We see Luffy fall down a garbage chute. Mocha gets pulled up on by Monette. Virgo continues hurting Law, and then we see Smoker pull up to fight Virgo. B tier, episode 610, and Luffy meets Momonosuke, and Luffy meets a dragon. B tier, episode 611. The dragon turns out to be Momonosuke, and we learn about how he got here. Luffy and Momonosuke start making their way out of the garbage. Smoker continues fighting Virgo, and Zoro saves everyone from Monette. B tier, episode 612. Luffy and Momonosuke continue making their way up, but then Momonosuke shows why he's a fraud, and him and Luffy fall all the way back down. Zoro continues fighting Monette, and she basically calls him sexist. Sanji and G5 show up, and Monette starts picking apart the G5 members. But then that's when our beautiful Queen Tashigi pulls up, and she tells Zoro that he's a fraud. B tier, episode 613.
One sword style.
He'll kill me.
S tier, episode 614.
I'm sorry, Chopper. I had to do it. They're my friends. Until they can help them out. I promise.
One Piece!
Episode 615. Caesar bullies Brownbeard for about 5 minutes, and then he has his men take shots at Brownbeard, just in time for Luffy to see it. Caesar starts explaining the smile fruits, but Luffy doesn't give a fuck and rocks Caesar's shit. A tier. Episode 613. Smoker's able to give Law his heart back, allowing Law to cut through Virgo, the mountain, and the smile machine. S tier. Episode 617. Mocha starts recovering, and Luffy defeats Caesar. A tier. Episode 618. Luffy makes everyone wait for the others before they leave. Baby 5 and Buffalo pull up to Punk Hazard, and Frankie pulls up to stop them. B tier. Episode 619. Frankie continues fighting Baby 5 and Buffalo. Caesar prepares to stab Smoker's heart. Luffy and the others start escaping, and Monette gets ready to blow up Punk Hazard. B tier. Episode 620. Monette's unable to blow up Punk Hazard due to her heart being stabbed by Caesar, and we find out that Law hit the greatest switcheroo of all time. Luffy and the others get closer to escaping, and Doflamingo starts making his way towards Punk Hazard. A tier. Episode 621. The gang makes it safely outside, and we see the two most useless Straw Hats do something useful. B tier. Episode 622. Momonosuke and Kinemon reunite, everyone starts partying, and we find out that Kaido is the Emperor Luffy and Law are going after. A tier. Episode 423. The Straw Hats say goodbye to the kids. We get a recap of the whole arc. The Straw Hats leave Punk Hazard, and Law tells Doflamingo to resign from being a warlord and he'll give him Caesar back. B tier. Episode 624.
I'm afraid I need you to step aside.
A tier. Episode 625. A tier. Episode 626 to 628 is some shitty ass filler. Just why? Episode 629. The world finds out that Doflamingo resigned from being a warlord, and that Luffy and Ace are allies. Doflamingo tells Luffy he has something he might want. Kinemon asks for Luffy and Law's help, and we find out that Doflamingo is in possession of Ace's Double Fruit. A tier. Episode 630. The Straw Hats arrive in Dressrosa. The Straw Hats split into 3 teams, and we're introduced to this really cool looking blind guy. B tier. Episode 631. The cool blind guy folds some randoms. Zoro's sword begins running away from him, and Luffy finds out about Ace's Double Fruit. B tier. Episode 632. Zoro continues chasing his sword. We witness some W-Riz from Sanji, and this toy soldier tells Luffy not to enter into the Coliseum. C tier. Episode 633. The tournament for Ace's Double Fruit begins. D tier. Episode 634. We see that Burgess entered the tournament. It's revealed that the blind guy is actually a Navy Admiral named Fujitora, and Bellamy reunites with Luffy. B tier. Episode 635. Law's team discovers that CP0 is on Dressrosa. Zoro is still chasing his sword. Kinemon gets surrounded by a bunch of people in skin-tight clothes. Sanji gets even more busy, and Team Protect the Ship gets pulled up on by bad animation. C tier. Episode 636. We see Bellamy fighting in a tournament, and this old guy finds out that Lucy is Luffy. C tier. Episode 637. Kinjal starts jumping Luffy over his beef of Garp, but bro ends up getting packed. Meanwhile, we see the contestants of Block B get smaller. C tier. Episode 638. Bardo wins Block B, and we see Toy Soldier talking to Frankie about the truth of Dressrosa. C tier. Episode 639. We see Bellamy compliment Luffy. Meanwhile, Law's team makes it the green bit, and we find out that Sanji was being finessed this whole time. B tier. Episode 640.
No matter what you say, no matter what anyone says, I believe in you. For me, a girl's tears are always enough proof!
A tier. Episode 641. After witnessing Sanji's amazing raise, Violet shows him the truth about Doflamingo. Luffy's block begins, Robin gets violated by some Smurfs, and Sanji tells Law that he's being set up by Doflamingo. D tier. Episode 642. We learn that Doflamingo never resigned from being a warlord, and Law gets surrounded by Fujitora and Doflamingo. Meanwhile, Luffy continues to know diff people in C block, and the world finds out that Doflamingo is still a warlord. A tier. Episode 643. Fujitora drops a meteor on him, Law, and Doflamingo, but all 3 survive. Sanji has to say goodbye to Violet. Luffy tames a bull, and Usopp continues to do Usopp things. B tier. Episode 644. The ship team gets turned into TikTok stickers. Bellamy gets tasked with killing Luffy, and Luffy packs up a giant. C tier. Episode 645. Zoro begins helping this fairy. Law continues defending himself from Doflamingo and Fujitora, and the C block competition gets smaller. C tier. Episode 646. Nami takes out some of Doflamingo's men, and Luffy and Don prepare to face off. C tier. Episode 647. We learn that the toys at Dressrosa are actually people. Law continues running from Doflamingo, and Robin and Usopp become part of Team Smurf. B tier. Episode 648. Robin and Usopp start making their way to the anti-Doflamingo coalition. Luffy continues fighting Don, and Doflamingo corners Law. C tier. Episode 649. We learn how Don lost his drill head to Garp, and Luffy defeats Don, making him the winner of Block C. C tier. Episode 650. We learn the backstory of Luffy's biggest blazer. Luffy talks to Blackbeard. Rebecca buys Luffy food. Rebecca finesses Luffy, but Luffy sees past that and throws throws Rebecca into a flashback. C tier. Episode 651. We get a whole entire episode dedicated to Rebecca's past. D tier. Episode 652. Doflamingo gets ready to kill Law, but gets stopped by Fujitora. We learn more about Toy Soldier's plan to take out Doflamingo, and Rebecca shows us that a good offense is a strong defense. C tier. Episode 653. The ship team defeats the old hag. C tier. Episode 654. Law escapes from Doflamingo, but Doflamingo decides to attack the ship team, but gets stopped by Sanji. B tier. Episode 655. Law saves the Straw Hats from Fujitora and Doflamingo, allowing for them to get away. Bardo meets Zoro, Rebecca keeps fighting in D block, and Doflamingo prepares to fight Law one-on-one. B tier. Episode 655. Law and Doflamingo begin fighting. Bardo has an orgasm. We get another Rebecca flashback, and Rebecca continues fighting in D block. D tier. Episode 657. More plot twist, more Rebecca flashbacks, more Rebecca fighting, and more orgasms. D tier. Episode 658. Even more plot twist, even more Rebecca flashbacks, and we find out that Toy Soldier is Rebecca's dad. The D's of D tiers. In episode 659 and 660, we learn the truth about what happened to Dressrosa. C tier. Episode 661. A tier. Episode 662. Kinemon and Zoro try to slide back for Law, but both end up getting folded. Meanwhile, Big Mom's ship pulls up on the Straw Hats, and we see a shadowed figure near the end of the episode. B tier. Episode 663.
Luffy.
A tier. Episode 664. Senor Pink and Frankie get ready to fight. Rebecca's still fighting in D block, and Robin, Usopp, and the Smurfs get prepared to take out Sugar. C tier. Episode 665. Rebecca flashback. Toy Soldier fights some people in an elevator, and D block is finally over. D tier. Episode 666. Rebecca wins D block. Senor Pink and Frankie keep fighting. We find out that Doflamingo is into BDSM, and Violet says she'll help Luffy get to Doflamingo's palace. C tier. Episode 667. Fujitora tells Doflamingo he doesn't like the warlord system, leading to a quick scuffle before the two come to an agreement. Luffy and the others continue making their way to Doflamingo, and the final battle of the tournament is about to begin. B tier. Episode 668. The final round of the tournament begins, and Luffy and the others make it to Doflamingo's palace. B tier. Episode 669. Pika pulls up on Violet, Luffy, and Zoro. Senor Pink gains some respect for Frankie, and Usopp, Robin, and the Smurfs get closer to Sugar. B tier. Episode 670. The Smurfs get ready to lay Sugar's grapes. Sabo keeps no-diffing people in the tournament. Toy Soldier gets folded by Netero, and Zoro gets ready to fight Pika on his own. B tier. Episode 671. Zoro cuts Pika in half. Toy Soldier gets folded by Netero again, and we see Smurf slavery. Meanwhile, Robin distracts this guy with snot coming out of his nose, and Leo's able to plant the lace grape, but Sugar identifies the lace grape and throws it away. This begins a fight between the two parties. Sugar contacts a slimy freak, and then we see Bro throw a ship at the building. B tier. Episode 672.
I believe in the commander. We have to help him defeat Doflamingo. We won't stop until he does. He's waiting for us, and we cannot let him down.
B tier. Episode 673. We get hit with some more Rebecca flashbacks. Kinemon becomes a Doflamingo cosplayer. Luffy, Violet, and Toy Soldier make it outside of Doflamingo's room. Robin gets turned into a doll. Wait, who is Robin? B tier. Episode 674.
I'm Usopp, you hear me? You better remember my name, Katanas. If I die here fighting for you, you gotta build a statue of me next to Nolan's. You ask for a hero? We'll sit back and watch because I'm about to become one right now.
A tier. Episode 675. We get a Kairos backstory flashback. C tier. Episode 676. S tier. Episode 677. Due to Sugar passing out, every toy in Dressrosa starts turning back to normal. Doflamingo gets really angry. Toy Soldier goes back to being Kairos. Another Rebecca flashback, and Kairos cuts off Doflamingo's head. A tier. Episode 678.
I take your ability.
S tier. Episode 679. We witness the greatness that is God Usopp. We find out Sabo is a part of the Revolutionary Army. We get a 2-minute flashback that we've already seen. Zoro becomes edgy, and we find out that Doflamingo is still alive. A tier. Episode 680. Luffy begins fighting Doflamingo, but ends up getting hit with a 2-piece. Doflamingo puts the birdcage over Dressrosa, and then he tells everyone about the new battle royale he's making. A tier. Episode 681. We see how dangerous the birdcage is, and Doflamingo starts explaining the rules to his game. This ends up leading to to the people at Dressrosa attacking the Straw Hats, and we get hit with yet another Rebecca flashback. B tier, episode 682. Law, Luffy, and Zoro start making their way towards Doflamingo, but end up running to Fujitora. B tier, episode 683.
Who opposes our family will be answering to me! Now step forward and fight! His voice! It's so high!
B tier, episode 684. The fighters from the Coliseum decide to help Luffy. B tier, episode 685. Zoro begins fighting Pika, and Luffy continues his way towards Doflamingo. B tier, episode 686. Law tells Luffy that Doflamingo killed his own brother, and we find out that Violet has the key to Law's cuffs. B tier, episode 687. A tier, episode 688. Bardo, Robin, and Rebecca start making their way towards Luffy. Senor Pink versus Frankie somehow gets even more peak, and Luffy and Law get cornered by Doflamingo. B tier, episode 689. Luffy and Law get saved by some randoms. Sabo continues fighting Fujitora. Senor Pink suplexes Frankie, and Luffy and Law continue making their way towards Doflamingo. B tier, episode 690.
The methods didn't matter.
For what?
For the only thing I care about. Destroying this world.
B tier, episode 691. Kinemon reunites with Kanjuro. B tier, episode 692.
3 sword style. 1080 caliber Phoenix.
A tier, episode 693.
Over again! So start crying, nothing will do you any good!
A tier, episode 494. Bardo and Robin come to help Luffy. B tier, episode 695. Rebecca runs into the guy that killed her mom. Bardo has another orgasm. Fujitora and Sabo are still fighting, and Law and Luffy continue making it towards Doflamingo. B tier, episode 696. We see that Rebecca's about to be packed out, and she screams for help from Toy Soldier. Kairos pulls up on the scene to save his daughter. We get hit with another Rebecca flashback. Law breaks out of the cuffs, and we witness the greatest plot twist scene in anime.
I'm not Lucy. I'm Luffy!
A tier, episode 697. S tier, episode 698. S tier, episode 699.
It was then that I found there was no escaping this hell. From that moment forward, I swore that I would destroy everything they held dear. To put it frankly, every damn thing in the world. The lives you've led cannot possibly be compared to what I've been through. I'm not wasting my time screwing around with brats like you. It's below me.
S tier, episode 700. Things are getting more dangerous in the birdcage, thus leading the Marines have no option but to mow down the people. You see more of Doflamingo's BDSM work. Doflamingo stomps the fuck out of Luffy. Doflamingo starts controlling Bellamy to fight Luffy, and Law and Doflamingo clash so hard that it triggers a 5-minute flashback. A tier, episode 701. We start Law's backstory. B tier, episode 702. We learn about Doflamingo's tragic and sad backstory. Law starts talking about D, and we see Corazon talk. B tier, in episode 703 to 706, we see Law and Corazon's journey to find Law Cure. We find out that Corazon's a Marine, and Doflamingo kills Corazon. A tier, episode 707. Luffy keeps weaving Bellamy. Frankie continues fighting Senor Pink. Kairos continues fighting Diamante. Zoro continues fighting Pika, and Law lands a level 3 super on Doflamingo. A tier, episode 708. Law loses the ability to beat with his right, and Luffy defeats the Doflamingo clone. A tier, episode 709. Doflamingo stops using Bellamy and calls him useless as fuck. We get some Bellamy flashbacks, and Bellamy turns into a bouncy ball. B tier, episode 710. We get a Baby 5 backstory. Netero is defeated, and Baby 5 falls in love with Sai. C tier, episode 711. Bellamy continues being a bouncy ball. Meanwhile, Law gets jumped and set on fire. B tier, episode 712. B tier, episode 713.
Maybe someday I'll be a man who's worthy of helping you. Pistol!
A tier, episode 714. Leo saves the princess. C tier, episode 715. We learn about Senor Pink's sad and tragic backstory. A tier, episode 716. Frankie defeats Senor Pink. S tier, episode 717.
Bastardo!
A tier, episode 718. Bellamy is still a bouncy ball. B tier, episode 719.
I don't have any more time to waste on a pebble like you. 9 minutes to 8 C's. There's nothing I can't touch. 3,000 worlds!
S tier, episode 720.
Thank you for calling me a friend.
S tier, episode 721.
You refuse to accept the hard seat. Then you bear the mark of the heart anyway? Why?
A tier, episode 722. The birdcage starts closing even faster, and Law and Luffy start jumping Doflamingo. S tier, episode 723. Doflamingo starts using cheats to repair his body. Trafalgar Plot gets saved by Luffy. Luffy and Doflamingo hockey clash. We learn more backstory about Doflamingo. Doflamingo starts tweaking out, and we see Bro's hockey turn purple. S tier, episode 724. We learn even more about Doflamingo's backstory, and this guy sets the place on fire. A tier, episode 725. Luffy and Doflamingo continue fighting. Doflamingo needs to shit out of Luffy, and we see Luffy blowing on his arm. S tier, episode 726.
One Piece!
Episode 927. Gear 4 Luffy and Doflamingo continue fighting. A tier, episode 728. Luffy falls out of Gear 4. A tier, episode 729. Sabo starts fighting Burgess. The fighters of the Coliseum come to help Luffy, and they all die to Doflamingo. A tier, episode 739. Everyone comes together to push back the cage, and Mancherry starts healing everyone with her tears. B tier, episode 731. Doflamingo starts controlling Rebecca to kill Violet. B tier, episode 730. Luffy saves Violet. A tier, episode 733.
One Piece!
Episode 734. Dressrosa is free. S tier, episode 735.
On behalf of the government, allow me to offer my most humble of apologies.
S tier, episode 736. We see the world's reaction to Doflamingo being defeated by Luffy and Law, and Akainu goes off on Fujitora. A tier, episode 737. We start another Sabo backstory. B tier, episode 738. We see how Sabo got his memories back, and then he leaves the Straw Hats to take care of Luffy. A tier, episode 740.
The man who longed for a place to die. King of the Beasts, Kaido.
A tier, episode 740. The Marines start looking for the Straw Hats. B tier, episode 741. Luffy kidnaps Rebecca to go see her dad. D tier, episode 742.
Doesn't matter how many people he may have killed, or how much his hands are tainted in blood. I only have one father. I'm proud to say I'm the daughter of heroes.
S tier, episode 743.
I don't care if it's a Navy Admiral or one of the 4 Emperors. I gotta beat them all someday, because if I don't, then I'll never be king of the pirates!
S tier, episode 744. Luffy and the others say goodbye to Dressrosa, and Fujitora starts wondering how handsome Luffy is. A tier, episode 745.
By coincidence, or by the hand of fate, with a pass of 7 mighty warriors crossed, they pledged their loyalty to Luffy. Their own adventures will bring them strength and renown, and one day in the future, they will play a part in a great incident of historic proportions.
A tier, episode 746. We learn about the changes in the new world, and we find out the Straw Hats' new bounties. B tier, episode 747 to 750, some shitty ass filler. Episode 751. We get a recap of the Straw Hats and how they formed, and Luffy and the others make it to Zoe. C tier, episode 752. We see that Burgess has found the revolutionary hideout, and Luffy and the others start climbing a giant elephant. B tier, episode 753.
Please, Ryunosuke! Ryunosuke! I love you, buddy! You're a true hero!
A tier, episode 754. We meet the Minks. C tier, episode 755. The Straw Hats make it to where the Minks are camping out. We reunite with Chopper and Nami tells Luffy that Sanji is gone. B tier, episode 756. The Straw Hats have a party. We learn about what happened between Sanji and Big Mom's ship, and the Straw Hats get summoned to meet Duke. C tier, episode 757. We learn about how the Beast Pirates are attacking the Minks. C tier, episode 758. The Straw Hats meet Duke. C tier, episode 759. We learn about how Cat Viper and Dogstorm are shitting on Jack. B tier, episode 760. We learn about how the Minks got taken out by a fart. We see how Dogstorm and Cat Viper lost a limb. B tier, episode 761. We learn about how the other Straw Hats helped the Minks. C tier, episode 762. Peckham shows up to Zoe looking for the Straw Hats, and after learning that the Straw Hats saved his home, he gives Sanji a thank you. But then we learn that Veggie doesn't fuck with thank yous. B tier, episode 763. We find out that Sanji is set to be married to Big Mom's daughter. B tier, episode 764.
It's my problem to solve.
I'll be back soon. So give everybody my best, okay?
A tier. Episode 765. The Straw Hats fight some bees. You meet Cat Viper. And the Straw Hats talk to Peckums. B tier. Episode 766. We learn about the methods Big Mom would use to make sure Sanji marries her daughter. We learn that when Sanji gets married, he'll have to leave the Straw Hats. Luffy tells Law he's gonna go save Sanji. We have another party. And we see that the samurai have made it to Zou. C tier. Episode 767.
So Raizo is here. And he is well.
A tier, episode 768, we meet Raizo. B tier, episode 769, we learn about the 4 red poneglyphs that are used to find Laugh-Tail. B tier, episode 770, we learn that the people of Wano made the poneglyphs. B tier, episode 771, the Ninja Pirate Meek Samurai Alliance has been formed. B tier, episode 772, we learn that Laugh-Tail is roughly 7,000 episodes away. B tier, episode 773, Jack and the Beast Pirates start attacking Zunisha. B tier, episode 774, Momonosuke calls out for help from Zunisha, and Zunisha packs up Jack. B tier, episode 775, they put a big band-aid on Zunisha. D tier, episode 776, Luffy's group sets out to go save Sanji. C tier, episode 777, we get another recap of the Alabasta arc. Just why? Episode 778, we get another Drum Island recap. Just why? Episode 779. B tier, episode 780 to 782 is some more filler, but it's watchable. D tier, episode 783, Sanji finds out what pudding looks like. D tier, episode 784, Luffy eats a poisonous fish and we meet Sanji's siblings. C tier, episode 785. B tier, episode 786, the Straw Hats meet Pudding. C tier, Pudding gives the Straw Hats the map to Whole Cake Island. C tier, episode 788, we see Sanji's other siblings, and Big Mom starts crashing out over food. C tier, episode 789, Jinbei tells Big Mom he'd like to leave her crew. B tier, episode 790, we learn the dark truth about Big Mom and her crew, and the Straw Hats make it to Whole Cake Island. B tier, episode 791, Luffy versus Luffy. D tier, episode 792, Nami gets violated for the 100th time. D tier, episode 793, we learn about how Sanji used to get junked by Alvin, Simon, and Theodore. C tier, episode 794, Sanji fights his dad. B tier, episode 795, we see Luffy catching copies of his friends, and Caesar begins working under Big Mom again. D tier, episode 796, we learn about the dark truth of Whole Cake Island. C tier, episode 797, the Straw Hats meet Big Mom's husband, they find out that Lola is Big Mom's kid, and Luffy begins fighting Cracker. C tier, episode 798, Nami folds Bruli, and Luffy continues fighting Cracker. C tier, episode 799, Luffy pops Gear 4 and destroys Cracker, then we find out that that was just Cracker's armor, and the real fight begins. B tier, episode 800.
You low-life bastard. How could you? Are you trying to leave a scar on a lady's face?
B tier, episode 801, Judge reveals that he knows about the Baratier, and then for the rest of the episode we watch a flashback that we have never seen before. A tier, episode 802, Simon hits a woman, Theodore shows Sanji the lab full of clones, and Sanji kicks the shit out of Simon. B tier, episode 803, Simon blows out Sanji's back, the 3 brothers laugh at him, and we learn about Sanji's sad and tragic backstory. B tier, episode 804, we finish the sad and tragic Sanji backstory. A tier, episode 805, Luffy starts eating out crackers after drizzling it in Nami's liquid. C tier, episode 806, Luffy defeats Cracker, Topper and Carrot get caught by Bruli, and then Vin and Smoke start heading to lunch with Big Mom. B tier, episode 807, Luffy catches up to Sanji, the Sanji kicks him away and tells him he's not joining the Straw Hats. This makes Luffy very angry, and the remainder of the episode are flashbacks that we have obviously never seen before. B tier, episode 808.
I need you on my crew, Sanji! Without you! Without you! I'll never be king of the pirates!
One Piece! Episode 809, the Vin Smokes have lunch with Big Mom and Pudding, and Luffy gets ready to take on the Candyman army. B tier, episode 810, Luffy continues no dipping the Candyman army, Topper is fending off Bruli and her siblings, and Sanji tells Pudding that he will marry her. B tier, episode 811, after giving it his all, Luffy ends up getting smashed by 2 dudes. Meanwhile, Big Mom tells Sanji she won't hurt the Straw Hats if he gets married to Pudding, and we experience one of the greatest moments in One Piece. S tier, episode 812, Nami and Luffy get locked up in the Slammer, Brook and Pedro get closer to the Poneglyph, Carrot's about to be turned into furry soup, and Luffy tells Big Mom to come run his fade. B tier, episode 813, Big Mom spends majority of the episode basically calling Luffy a fraud. C tier, episode 814.
It runs away, scared, that slug slapped on the spirit of yours.
When you hear my soul scream, it knocks you off your feet, baby.
B tier, episode 815. Pudding tells Luffy and Nami a little secret. Brook is about to start copying the poneglyphs but gets pulled up on by Big Mom, and Reiju gets caught lacking. B tier, episode 816. Brook and Big Mom are about to fight. We get a really long Pedro flashback, and Pedro cuts Dr. Eggman in half. B tier, episode 817.
What a riot. What kind of idiot would win a colossal failure like him? Seriously.
S tier, episode 818. Pudding uses her double fruit to erase Reiji's memory. We get this iconic Brook moment.
That everyone might die.
Only a fool would include his own death as part of a plan, young lady.
Meanwhile, Luffy's about to rip his arms off to go save Sanji, but ends up being saved by Jinbei. A tier, episode 819. We get another sad and tragic Sanji flashback. A tier, episode 820. Pedro goes boom, and Brook is defeated by Big Mom. B tier, episode 821. Reiji and Luffy have a talk about Sanji, and Luffy starts making his way back to the spot he told Sanji he'd be waiting at. B tier, episode 822. Sanji starts making his way to Luffy. B tier, episode 823. Jinbei saves Brook from Big Mom. Sanji continues making his way to Luffy, and Luffy gets his back blown out again. B tier, episode 824. We find out that Brook was able to copy the poneglyph, and Sanji finds Luffy. A tier, episode 825.
I get it. That's who you are. Have us, Sanji, and we'll crash that party.
One Piece! Episode 826. Jinbei tells the Straw Hats they should ally with Beji. B tier. Episode 827. The Straw Hats and Beji prepare to start talking about Big Mom. C tier. Episode 823. We find out Big Mom's weakness. B tier. Episode 829. The day of the wedding has arrived. C tier. Episode 830. Big Mom's tea party begins. C tier. Episode 831. The wedding begins. Another C tier. Episode 832. Pudding shows Sanji her third eye, but he ends up calling her pretty, causing her to mess up Big Mom's plan. We get a sad and tragic Pudding backstory, and then Luffy crashes the wedding. A tier, episode 833.
The man who I have chosen to follow will surely be king of the pirates someday. I can't be intimidated by a mere emperor of the sea.
S tier, episode 834. Brook breaks the picture frame, and between that and Luffy crashing the wedding, she starts to crash out, resulting in her kids to start fighting the Straw Hats. A tier, episode 835. S tier, episodes 836 to 837 is Big Mom's tragic and sad backstory. B tier, episode 838. Big Mom starts crashing out, resulting in the Straw Hats and Beji not able to get away, leaving them surrounded by Big Mom's children. B tier, episode 839. Sanji's family helps the Straw Hats and Beji's crew retreat. B tier, episode 840.
After this, we're done. You're not my father, Finn Smoke Judge, and don't you forget that. After this, I don't ever want to see your face again.
S tier, episode 841. Luffy and Big Mom clash, but Big Mom knocks Luffy out of Gear 4. Sanji grabs Luffy and they continue running away from Big Mom. Judge attempts to strike Big Mom, but ends up getting grabbed out of the air and folded into the ground. B tier, episode 842. A tier, episode 843. The Straw Hats say goodbye to Caesar and Beji, and Big Mom is off of perks. C tier, episode 844. B tier, episode 845. B tier, episode 846. B tier, episode 847. Chopper and Brook are protecting the Sunny, while the rest of the Straw Hats are running away from Big Mom. C tier, episode 848. Sanji goes off to help make a new wedding cake. Chopper and Brook get covered in sticky stuff, and the Straw Hats are still running away from Big Mom. C tier, episode 849. A tier, episode 850. We get a Carrot and Pedro flashback. Luffy starts fighting Katakuri, and it turns out this guy survived Pedro's explosion, making you wonder, did Pedro have to blow up, or did he want to blow up? B tier, episode 851. Luffy starts getting his ass beat by Katakuri. B tier, episode 852. Sanji begins working on the cake, and Luffy continues getting absolutely fucked by Katakuri. B tier, episode 853. We find out what a helmsman can really do. A tier, episode 854. Luffy takes some lovely backshots from Katakuri, Katakuri. B tier, episode 855. Germa protects their home from Big Mom soldiers, and we see that Luffy has lost to Katakuri. B tier, episode 856.
Oh, and donuts. I love to eat donuts. Even the holes treat donuts.
A tier, episode 857. Luffy continues getting his ass beat by Katakuri, and the wedding cake is still being made. A tier, episode 858. Luffy runs out of Gear 4 and is forced to take Broly through a random mirror, ending up on the same island as Big Mom. Meanwhile, this guy's enjoying Sanji's sticky white cream, and the wedding cake is finally complete. B tier, episode 859. Luffy runs from Big Mom's kids, Sanji saves Chip on, and Veggie starts making his way to come save his wife. C tier, episode 860. Veggie pulls up to save his wife and take the cake. We get a flashback of Luffy training observation hockey with Rayleigh, and Luffy gets ready to fight Katakuri again. B tier, episode 861. The cake team is able to get away, Pound gets folded, and Luffy continues embarrassing himself and Luffy continues getting embarrassed by Katakuri. A tier, episode 862. A tier, episode 863. Big Mom pulls up on the Sunny looking for some cake, and Luffy continues getting pummeled by Katakuri. A tier, episode 864. S tier, episode 865. Luffy uses Future Sight for the first time. A tier, episode 866. Luffy continues trying to use Future Sight. The Straw Hats continue getting pursued by Big Mom, but Beiji pulls up and she gets distracted by the cake, and Sanji reunites with the Straw Hats. B tier, episode 867. Luffy gets sniped with paralysis by Flampe, leading to him getting stabbed by Katakuri. Beiji continues luring Big Mom away, and the Straw Hats continue escaping Big Mom's army. We get another training flashback. Luffy starts doing the stanky leg.
Do the stanky leg. Do the stanky leg.
Flampe attempts to snipe Luffy again, but he weaves the shot. Or maybe he was just falling down. A tier, episode 868. S tier, episode 869. S tier, episode 870. One Piece! Episode 871.
Tell me one last thing. Will you return to defeat Big Mom someday?
I have to, don't I? Because I'm gonna be king of the pirates!
You're seeing quite far into the future.
S tier, episode 872. Peckham's goes out like a goat, and Sanji's family pulls up to save him and Luffy. A tier, episode 873. Sanji and Luffy start heading towards the Sunny. B tier, episode 874. The Straw Hats get saved by the Sun Pirates. B tier, episode 875. Big Mom has a couple orgasms after eating the wedding cake. The Sun Pirates make a path for the Straw Hats to escape, but then Oven starts baking the ocean. The fishmen get boiled, and we get to hear Big Mom sing.
It was just delish. What a great meal.
A tier, episode 876.
Just remember, Jinbei. I'm your captain now, so don't let me down! I'll be waiting for you in Wano. You better show up!
My deepest gratitude.
Jinbei! Don't die no matter what, got it?
S tier, episode 877. Beautiful conclusion to the Whole Cake Island arc. A tier, episode 878. We get this very unique, original, never seen before Luffy flashback. The world learns about what happened on Whole Cake Island, and Luffy gets dubbed as the 5th Emperor of the Sea. B tier, episode 879. We see that Kobe has become a captain. He learns about Luffy and Whole Cake Island. We get a very much needed recap of the first 3 episodes of One Piece. The 4 Emperors of the Sea react to Luffy in the newspaper, and we find out that Luffy's new bounty is 1.5 billion. A tier, episode 880. We're introduced to some of the members of the Revolutionary Army. B tier, episodes 881 to 889 might as well have just been a recap of every fucking One Piece episode. Just one! Episode 890, we get another recap of Marineford because why the fuck not? We learn about how the Blackbeard pirates know the Whitebeard pirates, and Cat Viper tells Marco that he would like his help in fighting Kaido. C tier. Episode 891, the Straw Hats start making their way towards Wano. C tier. Episode 892, we see what the other Straw Hats have been up to while waiting in Wano. Zoro gets transferred. Zoro kills the real killer, and look at that animation! And Luffy has arrived on a beach somewhere in Wano. B tier. Episode 893, Toei decides to flex even more of their animation. Zoro becomes a criminal. We're introduced to Tama, and she shows Luffy the powers of her devil fruit. B tier. Episode 894, Toma makes Luffy a bowl of rice, and he ends up eating it all. And then this happens, and then that happens, and then we learn about this, and then this happens again, and that happens, and this happens, and then we learn about Ace. D tier. Episodes 895 and 896 are pretty ass, but they got Boa Hancock. D tier. Episode 897, while taking Tama somewhere to get help, Luffy ends up running into Zoro. Hawkins pulls up, favorite idiots get ready to fight. B tier. Episode 898, Hawkins explains the devil fruit powers to Luffy and Zoro. He pulls out his Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and he summons a giant voodoo lady. B tier. Episode 899, A tier. Episode 900. Toma is back to feeling better. We witness the birth of the Red Bean Soup Gag. Some beast pirates pull up with some arrows, but the arrows get no death by Luffy and Zoro, and Tama gets kidnapped. C tier. Episode 901.
Let's just try it. Hey, bring me some pliers! Yes, sir! Not the little ones, the big scary pair!
C tier. Episode 902. Luffy begins fighting Shutamaru. C tier. Episode 903. Luffy defeats Shutamaru. C tier. Episode 904. Iku, Luffy, and Zoro start no-dipping the beast pirates. C tier. Episode 905. B tier. Episode 906. We see Law for the first time since Dressrosa. C tier. Episode 907. This episode is basically if One Piece was called Two Whole. D tier. Episode 908. C tier. Episode 909. We learn that Kinemon and the others traveled from 20 years in the past. B tier. In episode 910, we learn a little bit about the past of Wano. C tier. Episode 911. The Alliance begins their plan to take back Wano. C tier. Episode 912. We find out that Shutamaru is actually Ashura Doji. Ashura begins fighting Jack, and we get to see Kaido in his dragon form for the first time. B tier. Episode 913. Tier. Episode 914. S tier. Episode 915. Luffy continues beating on the drunk Kaido, but then Kaido locks in and knocks the fuck out of Luffy. A tier. Episode 916. Kaido finds out that Luffy has Conqueror's Haki. Luffy starts getting his ass dragged to jail. We find out that everyone somehow survived Kaido's attack. We get to see these amazing faces, and Luffy ends up in a cell with Kid. B tier. Episode 917.
On the port day of Reverie, the captains of the Revolutionary Army made their move. They risked it all to take back Kuba, busting into Marizuan, facing off with 2 Navy admirals, Ryokugyu and Fujitora. There's also something going down the land of Wano where the monster Kaido lives. Straw Hats, and there's been a lot of talk lately, is there, along with a whole slew of hot-blooded pucks. And hot on his tail is another emperor, angry as a wet bit, crazy old big bow. All seem to want the throne, but there can only be one king.
B tier. Episode 918. Kinemon comes to ask Ashura Doji for help, but he says, nah, I don't got time for that weak shit. We see the Straw Hats doing their part of the plan, Luffy's grinding hard in jail, and we're introduced to King and Queen. C tier. Episode 919.
You're in right now! You will get the death penalty for sure!
Huh? It wasn't us.
What?
If you think that we did something wrong, prove it.
C tier. Episode 920. Sanji gives this little girl some food, but then this asshole knocks it out of her hand, thus leading to Sanji and Frankie to fold both him and his homies. Sanji gives her another bowl of food, and she likes it a lot. Luffy gives this guy some tickets so he can go eat some balls, and Raizo pulls up to tell Luffy that he's working on breaking him out. C tier. Episode 921. Luffy reunites with Caribou. We get a very long flashback about some old guy being down bad, and we meet my future wife. D tier. Episode 922.
Great dragon shot!
C tier, episode 923. Yasui takes Zoro to Ebisu. Law is trying to help Sanji hide from the Beast Pirates. We're introduced to Orichi. We see the Straw Hats infiltrating Orichi's mansion. And Big Mom is on her way to Wano. C tier, episode 924. King sends Big Mom's crew back down the waterfall, and Big Mom falls into the water. Meanwhile, the Beast Pirates are destroying the village looking for Sanji, so Sanji pulls up on the scene to save them. B tier, episode 925. A tier, episode 926. Robin gets caught sneaking in Orochi's house, but it was just a clone and she gets away. She spills the tea to Shinobu and Nami, she gets back to blazing Orichi, and Chopper and the others find Big Mom. C tier, episode 927. We find out that Big Mom lost her memory, Toko laughs at Orichi threatens Toko, Iori slaps the fuck out of Orichi, so Orichi turns into a dragon and eats her. C tier, episode 928. Denjiro kills Iori, and Big Mom tries red bean soup. C tier, episode 929. Chopper and the others take Big Mom to go help save Luffy. This old guy takes some back shots while swallowing balls. This guy nets on Luffy's face, and Luffy gets angry. C tier, episode 930.
There's no way, just want to appreciate. I got enough fans attracted to my fork.
C tier, episode 931. King proposes a game for Luffy to play, and Luffy accepts. C tier, episode 932. B tier, episode 933. Chopper and the others are still making it towards Luffy. Luffy keeps trying to learn how to use Rio, and Zoro starts fighting Killer. C tier, episode 934. A tier, episode 935. We learn that my future wife is the sister of a fraud. B tier, episode 936. We learn about Hiyori's past, and we find out that the old guy is indeed built like that. B tier, episode 937. Luffy continues learning how to use Rio. Chopper and the others are still on their way to Luffy. We find out that Yasui's Toko's dad, and Luffy eats all of the red bean soup. C tier, episode 938. Oldham starts griefing Ashura Doji. Brook catches Zoro with the Huzz, and Yasui gets caught by the feds. B tier, episode 939. Yasui gets set up for execution. A tier, episode 940.
Here we go! Hey, hey, hey! I'm so sorry, Otoko. It looks like I'll be leaving you behind.
My daddy is dead!
You little brat!
Please, wait! They are all crying.
Crying?
The people from Ebisu Town are always smiling, because even when they're hurting or sad, they can't show it on their faces.
One Piece! Episode 941. We learn about how Orochi used the smile fruits on the people of Ebisu, thus leaving them forever smiling. Toko's about to be killed by Orochi, but she ends up getting saved by Sanji and Zoro. S tier, episode 942. The Straw Hats begin fighting against the Beast Pirates and Orochi's forces. Meanwhile, we see that Kid has been brought back to jail. We find out that Killer is forced to eat a smile fruit, and Luffy gets really angry. A tier, episode 943. Law gets bamboozled by Hawkins. Zoro and Tiara Sanji. Luffy gets ready to take out Queen, and Big Mom makes it to the prison. B tier, episode 944. Big Mom pulls up for some red bean soup, but after finding out that Queen ate it all, she folds him into the ground. B tier, episode 945. Luffy tells Big Mom that he ate the rest of the red bean soup, and she starts to crash out even more. B tier, episode 946. Luffy plays some tag with Big Mom. Queen finesses Big Mom and hits her with a headbutt, thus leading to her getting her memories back and crashing out. B tier, episode 947. Big Mom goes to attack Queen, but ends up passing out. Queen then has her chained up, transported to a ship, and then starts taking her to Kaido. And to end the episode off, we see this guy giving people monkeypox. B tier, episode 948. We're introduced to Kawamatsu, and we see everyone hitting a pose. B tier, episode 949. A tier, episode 950.
I am heir to Lord Odin, daimyo of this country! I am Kozuki Momonosuke! It's time! Let us rise up!
B tier, episode 951. Zoro defeats some masters of Spinjitzu. We learn about the fire festival. Luffy starts tweaking but then swallows some balls to feel better. And Law starts doing thirst traps. B tier, episode 952. Zoro and Onimaru start fighting, but then Kawamatsu shows up and tells them to cut it out. And then we see Big Mom and Kaido start fighting. B tier, episode 953. A tier, episode 954. We get a Kawamatsu and Onimaru flashback. Kawamatsu secures the weapons for the war against Kaido, and Hiyori offers a stronger sword to Zoro. B tier, episode 955. We learn about the sword Enma. A mysterious figure breaks the law to jail. Luffy keeps training. Kinemon goes over the plan one last time, and Kaido and Big Mom form an alliance. B tier, episode 956. S tier, episode 957. The warlord system gets abolished. B tier, episode 958. Unk Sengoku tells us about the God Valley incident. B tier, episode 959. The Akaza 9 get ready to go fight Kaido, but realize they've been blocked, leaving them with no other choice but to fight Kaido by themselves. A tier, episodes 960 and 962. We start the backstory of Kozuki Oden in Akaza 9. B tier, in episodes 963 to 965, we see Oden's journey with Whitebeard. A tier, in episodes 966 to 967, Oden leaves Whitebeard's crew to go help find the One Piece. A tier, episode 968.
I was thinking, we're the first people to step foot on this island in 800 years. I think we should name it Laugh Tale.
One Piece! Episode 969. We see the end of Roger's journey, and Oden goes back home to Wano. Oden learns about the corruption of Wano, and he also learns about Toki getting hurt to save his fraud son, resulting in him going to seek revenge. A tier, episode 970.
Roger! An unbelievable life. What a remarkable man!
S tier, episode 971.
Now bear witness. This is the tale of Kozuki Oden's uprising, a tale of courage and tragedy for which all of Wano wept. With him stood the 9 men he shaped into samurai.
S tier, episode 972.
Let's go!
S tier, episode 973. Oden makes a deal with Kaido to save the Akaza 9, and Shinobu tells everyone that Oden has been fighting for them this whole time. S tier, episode 974.
Oden wouldn't be Oden! Wouldn't be Oden if it wasn't for you!
Episode 975. We find out that Momonosuke was even more of a fraud than I thought. Toki sends these guys to the future, makes up a prophecy, and then she dies. A tier, episode 976. We find out that Ishimitsu is Denjiro, we get a Denjiro flashback, and we find out that Orichi has a traitor in the Akaza 9. B tier, episode 977. We find out that Kandro is a traitor, Kinemon cuts off his head, but it turns out we were bamboozled. As things start to look dire, a random cannonball hits one of the Beast Pirate ships, and we see the big three of the worst generation pulling up on the scene. A tier, episode 978. S tier, episode 979. Denjiro pulls up on the scene, bringing in reinforcements. Kawamatsu starts trying to save the fraud from Kandro, but Kandro ends up flying away with the fraud anyways. A tier, episode 980.
Gotta find a way to survive, okay? Just hang on, and we'll come rescue you! Because you're my friend.
A tier, episode 981. The Straw Hats farm some NPCs. B tier, episode 982. S tier, episode 983. The gang makes it to Onigashima. B tier, episode 984. We start having red bean soup flashbacks. C tier, episode 985. Luffy pulls some Beast Pirates for wasting red bean soup. B tier, episode 986. We see some of the worst CGI since Berserk 2016. C tier, episode 987. We get a worst generation team up. C tier, episode 988. The Big Mom crew starts making their way back to Wano, just to be kicked all the way back down by Marco. And Luffy and Zoro get lost. B tier, episode 989. Big Mom starts fighting Chopper and Usopp. B tier, episode 990. Luffy gets caught by Ulti, and before she can give him some crazy head, Yamato shows up to save Luffy. B tier, episode 991.
Impressive! You remind me of someone I once fought.
A tier, episode 992.
You really remind me of Ace.
B tier, episode 993.
We are new ally, Big Mom.
My apologies for the wait. I heard my name. Hello, Kaido.
A tier, episode 994. Kiku kills Kanjuro, and after some very sad flashbacks, the Akaza 9 start making their way towards Kaido. A tier, episode 995. S tier, episode 996. The battle for Wano's freedom begins. B tier, episode 997. The Akaza 9 and the Mink start fighting Kaido and the Beast Pirates. B tier, episode 998. Big Mom pops a hollow purple. Sanji saves the fraud. And Frankie and Brook do a drive-by on Big Mom. B tier, episode 999. Frankie uses full power energy wave to take out a number. And the Straw Hats send Big Mom to Narnia. B tier, episode 1000.
You better get ready, Kaido! I'm coming for you!
One Piece! Episode 1001. We find out that ex-Drake is actually a traitor, and that he was the one who let Law out of his cell. Drake throws a grenade and escapes. Luffy and Drake both take out a number, and then Drake asks Luffy if they can ally. B tier, episode 1002. Zoro and Drake start jumping a poo, Queen starts shooting his minigun, and people start turning into ice monsters. C tier, episode 1003. A tier, episode 1004. S tier, episode 1005. Kiku loses her arm. B tier, episode 1006. Yamato saves the fraud, and the Akaza get ready for round 2 of Kaido. B tier, episode 1007. Everyone starts playing a fun game of reverse tag. B tier, episode 1008.
He'll beat Kaido, and he'll become King of the Pirates!
A tier, episode 1009. Carrot slides back for Pedro. Thomas saves Nami and Usopp, and Yamato takes out a number. B tier, episode 1010. The big fight continues. Big Mom starts making her way to the roof, and the rest of the episode is this boring ass zombie ice shit. D tier, episode 1011. Sanji gets kidnapped by some attractive women. Luffy finds a shortcut to the roof, and we see that Kaido has defeated the Akaza. C tier, episode 1012. Marco joins in on the ice zombie bullshit fun. Chopper starts making a cure, and Frankie starts fighting a Triceratops. D tier, episode 1013. We get an Ace and Yamato flashback. B tier, episode 1014. We get another Ace flashback. C tier, episode 1015.
I am Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will surpass you. And I'm gonna be King of the Pirates!
S tier, episode 1016. The big 3 of the worst generation get ready to fight Kaido. A tier, episode 1017. 4 of the worst generation get ready to take on 2 of the Emperors of the Sea. S tier, episode 1018. Kaido transforms into his hybrid form. S tier, episode 1019. Tama makes an army of Beast Pirates. C tier, episode 1020.
Help me, Robin! Help me, please!
A tier, episode 1021. Sanji gets saved by Brook and Robin. Peril Sparrow becomes P Breezy. The Emperor versus Worst Generation battle heats up, and the greatest mommy fight in anime is about to begin. B tier, episode 1022. Marco pulls up on the scene and folds both King and Queen, and Chopper tests the cure on himself. C tier, episode 1023. Chopper cures everyone and hits the fuck out of Queen. D tier, episode 1024. Kanjuro pulls up disguised as Odin, and the Worst Generations continue fighting the Emperors of the Sea. B tier, episode 1025. Ashura Doji pulls a Pedro. We see that Ororichi is still alive. The Emperor charged up a hockey purple, but it gets blocked with ease by our goat Zoro. A tier, episode 1026. Kinemon seemingly kills Ororichi, and everyone on the top of Onigashima locks in. A tier, episode 1027. One Piece! Episode 1028. S tier. In episodes 1029 and episode 130, we get some filler for One Piece Film Red. C tier. Episode 1031. Big Mom folds page 1 for trying to hurt Tama. A tier. Episode 1032. Nami folds Ulti for trying to hurt Tama. B tier. Episode 1033.
It's been a long time since I got worked up enough to get sloppy. I should have chopped your head off and shown it to your friends. They have to know you've lost. Otherwise, they'll keep holding on to the foolish hope that you'll return.
One Piece! Episode 1034. We get a flashback of all of Odin's journeys. Big Mom tries to kill Usopp, Nami, and Toma, but ends up getting stopped by Kid. B tier. Episode 1035. Kanjuro stabs Kiku, Kinemon kills Kanjuro, and Kaido pulls up looking for the fraud. A tier. Episode 1036. S tier. Episode 1037. Shinobu and the fraud get knocked off of Onigashima, the Heart Pirates find Luffy, and Yamato pulls up to fight Kaido. A tier. Episode 1038. Shinobu and the fraud are safe, Yuffie gets cooked by Nami and Zeus, Hama conquers more beast pirates, and Yamato and Kaido start having the family fight of the century. A tier. Episode 1039. Who's Who and Jinbei start fighting, and Who's Who starts telling Jinbei the truth of Luffy's devil fruit and how dangerous it is to the world government. A tier. Episode 1040. Jinbei defeats Who's Who. A tier. Episode 1041. Chopper turns Zoro into a junkie, we see Yamato's devil fruit form, Frankie continues fighting the Heliceratops, and Luffy says he needs some meat. A tier. Episode 1042. Frankie continues fighting Heliceratops, Kaido continues fighting Yamato, and we get to see Robin's backstory for the very first time. B tier. Episode 1043.
Iceberg.
A tier. Episode 1044. Rook and Robin beat Black Maria and her subordinates, and the fraud asks Shinobu to make him older. S tier. Episode 1045. My Goat starts 1v2ing King and Queen. A tier. Episode 1046.
Purgatory!
S tier. Episode 1047. Momonosuke and Luffy get ready to go fight Kaido. B tier. Episode 1048. We learn about Yamato's sad and tragic backstory. B tier. Episode 1049. S tier. Episode 1050. Prada Nosuke bites Kaido. B tier. Episode 1051. Jack and Lollipop Liquor defeated by Dogstorm and Cat Viper. Momo Fraud starts using flame clouds. And Luffy and Kaido continue fighting. A tier. Episode 1052. The fraud starts pushing back Onigashima while saying he can't do it. And Sanji and Zoro start fighting Queen and King. B tier. Episode 1053. Sanji finds out he's a cyborg. A tier. Episode 1054. Killer beats Hawkins. S tier. Episode 1055. Conjuro makes a fire monster as his last order. And CP0 starts coming after Robin. B tier. Episode 1056. The fire slime continues making its way towards the bombs, while Yamato is making her way to stop it. Long Kid lock in against Big Mom. B tier. Episode 1057. A tier. Episode 1058. Kid and Law continue fighting Big Mom. The fire slime keeps making its way towards the bombs. The fraud starts becoming useful. Zoro continues fighting King but ends up losing the ability to be with his right. And Orichi finds out that his beloved Komurasaki is alive. A tier. Episode 1059.
One sword style. EI.
Death. Lion Song.
A tier. Episode 1060. We get some very much needed Zoro flashbacks, and Zoro unlocks Conqueror's Hockey. S tier. Episode 1061.
Now get lost, you asshole!
One Piece! Episode 1062. One Piece! Episode 1063. The fraud goes back to being a fraud. Izo pulls out his flintlock with switches, and CP0 takes out Drake. B tier. Episode 1064. Luffy and Kaido start clashing. We see the 5 elders, and Zunisha starts pulling up to Wano. A tier. Episode 1065. Zoro comes face to face with death. Izo pulls up to stop CP0. Yamato takes out the fire slime, and Law and Kid start no-dipping Big Mom. S tier. Episode 1066. One Piece! Episode 1067. Big Mom is defeated, and the fraud senses Zunisha coming. S tier. Episode 1068. Izo dies. Kaido mourns Big Mom, and Orichi finds out that Komurasaki is actually Hiyori. A tier. Episode 1069. Luffy and Kaido get ready to have a crazy clash, but then Luffy gets distracted by a CP0 agent, resulting in Luffy being defeated and Kaido feeling cock-blocked for the second time. One Piece! Episode 1070.
Perhaps Luffy is dead.
Luffy is dead? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard! I told you, when Luffy says he'll win, he'll stand up, he'll fight, and he'll win! He'll shut you up for good, you lying bastard! Luffy! I know you can hear me! You always keep your word, right? So get up and finish this!
Sword has returned!
One Piece! Episode 1071. One Piece! Episode 1072. We realized that Gear 5 Luffy's on crack. S tier. Episode 1073. Raizo and Jinbei put out the fire, and Luffy grabs a fucking lightning bolt. S tier. Episode 1074. Luffy continues absolutely fucking on Kaido. S tier. Episode 1075. We get a flashback of all the terrible things Orochi has done to Wano, or Orochi gets killed by Denjiro, and Luffy and Kaido start the clash of a century. S tier. Episode 1076. One Piece! Episode 1077. The country of Wano is now free. S tier. Episode 1078. The fraud becomes the new shogun of Wano. A tier. Episode 1079.
You guys, you don't have to be so loud!
I hope I can be as bewitching as you someday.
Dare I say B tier again? Episode 1080. The Straw Hats party with the country of Wano. Hashirama Senju pulls up, and we find out about the new emperors of the sea. S tier. Episode 1081. The Akaza 9 start fighting Hashirama. We get a flashback of the day Shang stole the Gum Gum fruit. We learn that Sabo killed Cobra, and Momo Fraud pulls up to fight Hashirama. A tier. Episode 1082.
Why can't I move? Kamasaki, who the hell is there?
One Piece! Episode 1083. Law, Luffy, and Kid get prepared to leave Wano, and we learn about Cross Guild. B tier. Episode 1084. We see what everyone was doing the day before. C tier. Episode 1085. The Straw Hats leave the country of Wano. B tier. Episode 1086. We see every member of the Straw Hats' new bounty. A tier. Episode 1087. Blackbeard pulls up on Hancock. B tier. Episode 1088.
I never did like you. Like this category. Let's make this quick.
S tier. Episode 1089. A tier. Episode 1090. Would you believe me if I said Jewelry Bonnie was 12? B tier. Episode 1091. The Straw Hats have made it to Egghead Island. B tier. Episode 1092. Blackbeard pulls up to take Law's Devil Fruit. A tier. Episode 1093. Blackbeard starts violating Law. A tier. Episode 1094. The Straw Hats encounter their first Seraphim. B tier. Episode 1095. The Straw Hats fight the Jinbei Seraphim. We're introduced to Shaka, and Luffy's team finds a giant robot. B tier. Episode 1096. We meet Dr. Vegapunk. B tier. Episode 1097. We get a Vegapunk backstory, and we learn about all the personalities that make up Vegapunk. B tier. Episode 1098. CP0 has arrived in Egghead, and we learn that they're here to kill Vegapunk for digging too deep into forbidden history. B tier. Episode 1099. Rabuchi pulverizes the fuck out of Atlas. A tier. Episode 1100. One Piece! Episode 1101. One Piece! Episode 1102. The Straw Hats get finessed into taking care of Vegapunk, CP0 gets control of the Seraphim, and we're shown that the Marines are on their way to Egghead Island. B tier. Episode 1103. Bonnie finds out that this is full of Kuma's memories, and Garp gets ready to go save Kobe. B tier. Episode 1104. CP0 pulls up on the Sunny, and Kaku starts fighting Zoro before both he and Rabuchi get sucked dry by Stussy. B tier. Episode 1105. We find out Saturn is on his way to Egghead. B tier. Episode 1106. The Straw Hats go searching for Vegapunk. C tier. Episode 1107. Bonnie starts looking at Kuma's sad and tragic memories, and York gets folded by the Boa Hancock Seraphim. C tier. Episode 1108.
おい、何がこれは過去の人間は少々注視して一時手を加める情報を外してくれる役に立つと思う
B tier, episode 1109. Lucci, Luffy, Zoro, and Kaku team up to fight the Seraphim, and Kid pulls up to fight Shanks. A tier, episode 1110. The Straw Hats start fighting children, and the group of Usopp gets turned to stone. Shaka finds Vegapunk, but then he gets his brains blown out by the traitor. B tier, episode 1111. We find out York is the traitor. B tier, episode 1112.
One Piece!
Episode 1113. Garp and the members of Sword have shown up to save Kobe from Blackbeard. A tier, episode 1114.
One Piece!
Episode 1115. We get a flashback on how Blackbeard recruited Aokiji. Garp beats Aokiji into the ground. Meanwhile, we find out that Law has been added to the Blackbeard list. Eppo pops a perk to save Law. And though the two are able to get away, the Heart Pirates have been defeated. S tier, episode 1116. We find out that Buggy has become the big ship Crocodile and Mihawk. We get this really peak flashback of Buggy and Shanks. Buggy declares the search for the One Piece, and Sabo prepares to tell us what actually happened at the Reverie. A tier, episode 1117. We find out about all the different stuff that happened at the Reverie. A tier, episode 1118. Cobra finds out about the existence of Emu. S tier, episode 1119.
夜明けの旗を掲げネフェウタリ D リリー頼んだぞサボ君
S tier, episode 1120. We learn about what happened after Cobra's death, and Sabo tells Dragon and Ivankov about the powerful weapon the world government has at their disposal. A tier, episode 1121.
One Piece!
Episode 1022.
One Piece!
Says thank you and farewell, and then Gene says, and he says his farewells to Gene, and he says his farewells to Luffy and Zoro, and he says his farewells, and he says his farewells to Zoro. Oh fuck!
Oh, hi, Oni-chan. Daisuki, Onegaishimasu.
Oh, Waioma, oi oi oi, baka. Usopp ends up telling Luffy that his pirate. Usopp ends up telling Luffy that his father is also a pirate and that his name is Usopp. Usopp ends up telling Luffy that his father is also a pirate and his name is Usopp. Usopp ends up, Law helps up, fuck! Law helps up. Kinemon gathers everyone.
Ah, and Hiyori offers the nuke.
Oh my god, what the fuck? Luffy tells Big Mom, yay! Luffy tells Big Mom, yay, Elder Red Bean soup! Luffy tells Big Mom that yay, Elder Red Bean soup, and she crashes out. Luffy tells Big Mom that yay, there's the beer. Luffy tells Big Mom that yay, there's the... Oh my fucking god, I've been saying this for 1 minute straight.
I just wanna another one. I just wanna tap on talking to the sun. I just want to be like it, go to sleep. I just want to be so lonely, go to sleep.
The world learns about what happens on hold. The world learns putting.
Oh my god, what?
We learn about how the other straw hats. Netero floats. Fuck! And we see the two most useless straw hats. And we see the two most useless straw hats twist. And we see the two most useless. Oh my fucking god. Useless. The most useless. And toy soldiers. And toy soldier tells Ricky the truth. And toy soldiers are showing. And toy soldiers are. It turns out that Zeph saves on. It turns out that Zeph saves on. Oh my fucking god. Don Krieg's Vice Captain Green. Don Krieg. Holy fuck!
He's at the door.
It turns out that whiskey people learned. Episodes. Oh my fuck! Therefore forcefully.
I can make a funny mistake!
Oh my god.
Life's so good. Kinemon stops the Kinemon stops the shit out of the trick. Kinemon stops the shit out of the... Oh, fuck, I can't say it. It's just not worth it, it's just not what it is.
Yeah,